Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto wasn't the only Kyūbi container, Rin was too? Episode 1. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, a long-buried secret is about to rewrite everything the shinobi world thought it knew. What if the Nine Tails power had been divided between two jinchūriki from the very beginning? Now, let's start. Konohagakure, November. Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash, the Yondaime Hokage, was dead. With the unleashing of the Kyūbi came untold destruction in Konoha to only be stopped by the Yondaime's heroic sacrifice by sealing off the beast using the Shiki Fujin, sacrificing his very soul in the process. With that, the beast was slain. Or was it? As the villagers buried their dead and celebrated the vanquishing of the demon, one man sat at his desk, doing the best of his ability to maintain a sense of stability in the village that was his sacred charge to defend. It should have been me, not you, Minato. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage, thought to himself, sitting behind his desk with a mountain of paperwork consisting of orders to be sent out to Konoha's remaining shinobi fit for missions. With his successor's death, he had been forced to take up the mantle of Hokage again. Despite his desire for retirement, he knew that few others could hold the position without showing a sign of diminishment in the eyes of the other villages. Tsunade hasn't been in the village since Dan's death, and would never take the hat. Orochimaru shows too much cruelty, something good on the battlefield, but leaves him being feared by much of the civilians. And Jiraiya, he paused. Jiraiya was a subject that still left a raw feeling, even after several weeks since their conversation occurred. Flashback. Why not, sensei? Jiraiya nearly shouted, his anger clearly visible in his tone of voice and body language. Minato trusted me to be a godfather, and I will not shirk that duty. I promised to care for his and Kushina's child should anything happen to them. Jiraiya, Hiruzen responded, his whole demeanor that of someone carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. Konoha is in a precarious position. All the gains that Minato made in the war have been undone by his death and the Kyūbi attack. We cannot let ourselves be seen as weak. I am already putting out plans to send most of our elite shinobi out to increase the level of A and S rank missions we complete to give the image of strength. We can't hope to defeat Kumo and Iwa with our forces in the state they are in. We need to give the perception that Konoha still stands strong. I need your spy network to be at full strength, with all your attention put into it. You aren't able to do that when playing the role of parent. I don't care about the network. Jiraiya raised his voice even more. I promised. Hiruzen could feel the air become saturated with his student's chakra. Before the white-haired Sannin seemed to collapse in on himself, his head hung low. He started, voice cracking with the effort. I wasn't there for Tsunade when Dan died. I wasn't there when Minato needed me. Please, he practically begged his sensei. Don't make me not be there again. I can't fail again, he finished, his eyes shining with emotion. Hiruzen let out a depressed sigh. He knew Minato's death had hit the village hard, but no one had been hit nearly as hard by it as Jiraiya. Losing his beloved Bawako left a wound that Hiruzen knew would never heal. He shuddered at the thought of losing either of his sons. He could understand Jiraiya's pain of losing someone he held dear, but he knew there was no one else better to be Konoha's spymaster than Jiraiya. Jiraiya wouldn't be able to juggle the roles of caretaker and spymaster, despite any of his protests to the contrary. Jiraiya, he said quietly, Minato sacrificed everything for the village. It will be all for nothing if everything he fought for came crashing down within a few years. Protecting the village will protect what he died for. Things can change in a few years, once we have recovered. Please, can you wait some time? Jiraiya stood there, still as a statue for several moments, deep in thought. If I can smooth things out with the network, I can get back here within a couple years. I promised you, Minato. And I'll keep that promise no matter what. He thought. Visibly slumping, he gave Hiruzen his answer. Okay, he said, all the anger previously disappearing. For Minato, I'll do it. Hiruzen let out a sigh of relief. He was worried that Jiraiya would let his grief at the loss of someone he saw as a surrogate son destroy his capacity of being one of the few active S-rank shinobi Konoha had on its roster. He knew that Konoha could ill afford the loss of a second Sannin, with Tsunade taking an extended leave since the death of her fiancé. Thank you, Jiraiya, Hiruzen said, a small, but sad smile adorning his face. I will ensure that there is no danger to Minato's legacy. I swear it. He finished firmly. The Toad Summoner let a small smile on his lips. Now that we've addressed what will be done, can I go? He asked, the location he wished to go being left unsaid. I'll go with you myself, Hiruzen replied as he leaned back, stretching his back until he heard an audible pop. I've been behind this desk for too long today. It'll do me some good to go out to see the village. With that, the professor stood up and made his way out of the tower. He turned to ask Jiraiya if he would walk with him, only to be met with a slight flash of white near the bottom of the window, before it vanished. With a rueful chuckle and a shake of the head, Hiruzen continued his trek towards the hospital to see a very special patient. Never change, my student. Never change. End flashback. Still sat at his desk, a stack of mission reports at the side, Hiruzen lit his pipe and took a long drag before exhaling, relishing the sensation. I'm sorry for what has to be done, Jiraiya. You can be the godfather you ought to be when we can get the village on firm footing again. He sighed internally, saddened by what he was forced to do as the Hokage. A Kage must put the village first, even above his own life, and his family. The Shodai and Nadaime died for the village, a fact that never failed to bring a stab of sadness to the Sandaime's aged visage. Hashirama-sensei and Tobarama-sensei died for the village. Minato gave up the very possibility of a peaceful death, and the chance for his family to be whole and normal, for a Hokage's family that is. I hope to Kami that I never will be forced to make such a choice. The village, or my heart. He finished those dark thoughts right as he heard a request for entrance into his office. Enter, he called, fairly certain of who the identity of the individual was. Nara Shikaku, commander of Konoha's Jonin forces, entered the Hokage's office, a look of fatigue adorning his face. Hokage-sama, he announced tiredly. I have the latest mission reports from our forces in the Land of Fire. And? Sarutobi asked, wishing to hear the details. How is the mission rate? Is the news good? He finished, hoping for good news. Yes, Shikaku replied, attempting to keep the evidence of fatigue out of his posture and voice. Despite our losses, we've managed to maintain the same level of mission turnout before the attack. It's been hard, but we've managed. He finished. Sarutobi sat there quietly for a moment, thinking over the positive news he had just heard. We lost over a fifth of our forces in the Kyūbi attack to fatalities or to career-ending injuries. Not to mention Minato and Kushina. To think that we could keep our mission turnout levels even, is a testament to the shinobi force's motivation. He knew it would take its toll. He could nearly see the fatigue rolling off of Shikaku's frame, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. They couldn't keep that up for a prolonged period. Not with the numbers available. The council had pitched a potential idea of slightly lowering the academy's passing standard. It can't be that bad, they had said. More civilians will graduate, and your own student Jiraiya was from a civilian background. It won't be so bad. The council didn't understand that if it hadn't been for Jiraiya's indomitable will to succeed, and having the right teacher, he would not have been what he's known as today. Out of all my students, Jiraiya's will of fire burned brightest. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Hiruzen addressed his Jonin commander. Thank you for the report, Shikaku. You are dismissed. At his leader's dismissal, Shikaku turned to leave, only to be stopped by Hiruzen. And Shikaku, he called, do try to sleep. You'll do no good when you're half dead on your feet. Get some rest, and spend some time with your wife and son. You've earned it. At his Hokage's order, Shikaku nodded and thanked him before leaving to head home, or more specifically, his sweet, sweet bed. After Shikaku's departure, Hiruzen reached into one of his desk drawers, pulling out a medical report from a medi-nin at Konoha's hospital, looking over the report for what felt like the millionth time. What ails you, dear child? He thought, thinking back to the first time he had heard the medi-nin's report alongside Jiraiya. Flashback. Walking through the village he called his home normally would give him a feeling of peace. But now, it only causes heartache and sadness. Hiruzen walked towards Konoha's hospital, a cloak of sadness seeming to cling to his frame. Not even in the ensuing days after the Nadime's death, and his appointment as the Sandaime, did Hiruzen feel such a sense of defeat. The wreckage of buildings from the Kyūbi attack could be seen with no effort at all. It would take months at the least with shinobi aid to clear it all. The number of dead and unaccounted for were still being counted. Kami no Shinobi, the Professor, Sandaime of Konohagakure. All these titles and I still couldn't protect my home. My beloved Bawako. He knew he shouldn't blame himself. He had no idea that the Kyūbi would break loose from Kushina's seal, causing untold destruction. He didn't know he would slit his wife's throat as she aided Kushina in childbirth. But it's so easy to blame myself for it. He shook those thoughts from his head. He knew where he was headed. He knew how much the remaining night would wring Jiraiya's heart. His student needed him. And he would be there for him. I couldn't stop what happened. But I can make a difference now. With that thought, the Sandaime quickened his pace, intent on helping his eccentric student in one of his darkest hours. Arriving at the hospital, Jiraiya stretched out his senses trying to locate his mentor. He probably should have walked with Sensei, if only for the company. Him being on his own gave him too much time to think. Thinking was bad. Thinking made him remember. Remember his promise. Stop it. Stop it. You'll only make it worse. He thought to himself. He didn't need to lose what sanity he did have. Never accuse Jiraiya the gallant, Toad Sage of Mount Myoboku, of claiming he was totally sane. He wasn't sane, but he wasn't crazy either. After a brief pause, Jiraiya located his teacher's chakra signature, bright as it was, and it was headed towards him. Moments later, they faced one another, where Jiraiya broke the silence. What room? He asked, not certain where an appropriate location in the hospital would be. Room 16, Hiruzen replied, walking towards the location mentioned, with his former student to his left. They had to move the room and seal it as best they could. Chakra fluctuations were causing the other children distress. Do you know what's causing it? Jiraiya asked. Seal malfunction. I wouldn't think Minato. Jiraiya paused, taking a deep breath. I wouldn't think Minato would make that kind of mistake. Granted, being in the situation that occurred, there might have been an error. Arriving at the door, Hiruzen responded to the other man. That's why I want you to check it. I'm not the most accomplished in sealing. You'll likely see something I don't. With that, the two men entered the room, being met by a haggard-looking nurse sitting in a chair to the side of the room. Upon seeing the two men, the nurse nearly jumped out of her chair in fright, attempting to compose herself. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sama, she squeaked out nervously, I didn't think you would be here so soon. Seeing the near terror in the young woman's eyes, Jiraiya quickly attempted to relieve her of her worries. Using all the charm he had in calming women down, it was a lifesaver in his genin team to have that skill. He put his hands out in a placating manner and responded. Nonsense. Don't feel worried. You have done a wonderful job here. Your skills are only matched by your beauty, my lady. Think nothing of it. The young woman's face flushed slightly at the compliment, unsure on how to respond to being complimented, or was it flirted with, by one of the legendary Sannin. Thank you, sir, she said. Before composing herself, I had just managed to calm him down maybe an hour ago, she continued, gesturing towards the crib. He wouldn't stop screaming for hours when he was alone. Jiraiya stepped forward to gaze upon the contents of the crib. Inside, was a newborn baby boy lying on his side with a tuft of strawberry blonde hair atop his head, and whisker-like birthmarks on his cheek. Intertwined with his right hand, was the hand of a baby girl, also having whisker-like marks, but with a small patch of golden blonde hair on her head. Hello little ones, Jiraiya whispered, a tear rolling down his cheek, speaking in a tone seemingly far too soft for a man of his physical stature. I'm your godfather. Where am I? What happened? I thought to myself, desperately trying to piece together what I last remembered. Glass breaking. Shouting. The squeeze of a trigger. A shadowy silhouette striking the ground. Another comes from the other door. I turn, but too late. Several things punch me repeatedly in the chest, knocking the air from my lungs. I only realized what had happened when I fell to the ground, unable to get up. I'd been shot. No, not like this, God. Please, don't let me bleed out alone. There was something rather tragically ironic about one beseeching God for salvation at the moment of death. Especially when you can't even speak through the blood filling up your lungs. Does that mean I'm dead? I thought, desperately trying to understand what situation I'm in. Didn't think heaven, or hell for that matter, was supposed to be a void. Unless I'm not dead. Coma, maybe. Blood loss causes brain damage resulting in work. Better than dead. I just need to lay here and wait it out. And I waited, and waited. For an inordinate amount of time, I waited. Until eventually, for the first time in a while I felt something yank at my being, for lack of a better term, and I felt my thoughts begin to unravel. I have no idea how long it took for my thought processing to begin to resemble stability again, but it eventually did happen. When it did, I noticed something had changed. I could feel it. Very minute, but I could feel it. My whole body seemed to itch and I couldn't scratch it. I tried to open my eyes to see, but they refused to open. Damn it. Why won't you let me see? I shouted in my mind, at nothing in particular. Open. 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 And like that, a seething inferno seemed to explode within my senses. Reeling from the pain, I pulled back the feeling that had caused it. Okay, let's try to be a little more careful. Trying to keep myself calm, I tried to recreate the feeling of what I had just done. Reaching out, but without my hand. Seeing, but without my eyes. Grasping, but without my fingers. Calm. Slowly reach out. There is nothing but yo. There. There it is. Slowly gathering my courage, I reached a little harder to paint a better picture of my surroundings. There, 3 lights, from what I could feel. One felt bright. Like a warm campfire in the night, it gave me a sense of ease simply by being near it. Another felt smaller, but so bright. Like a fresh fire. It felt so chaotic and in flux, but it was the one nearest to me, only slightly closer than the first. But the third is what frightened me. It felt biting cold, yet it felt like an inferno at the same time. The sheer presence it held was something unimaginable. What's going on? I wondered. If I'm not dead, then I've gone mad. People can't sense others like that. It isn't Star Wars. But the longer I remained there, I began to wonder what the things I was feeling might entail. I didn't notice it before, but I can feel a heartbeat. It's surrounding me. I can't tell where it is. It's everywhere. What else? My whole stinking body itches, but I seem to be getting better at it. And it feels like I'm floating in some thing. God please no. I couldn't accept it. It wasn't possible. I didn't believe in reincarnation. People aren't even supposed to keep their memories if they did have a second life. It can't be. After I had calmed myself down to a reasonable level, I tried to look at the evidence, or lack thereof, involving my predicament. Fact. I got shot repeatedly in the chest. Opinion. I could have survived, but it's unlikely. Fact 2. I can feel lights around me, something that's not generally supposed to be possible. 3. I can hear a heartbeat that is not my own. Heartbeat indicates either my hearing is useless, or there's something else alive near me within hearing range. The more I thought about it, the more the likelihood seemed that I had been given a second life. But one, and only one thing, was stopping me from concluding that. How am I capable of this level of thought? Babies don't have the brain growth currently to maintain that high of cognitive function. If I'm not even fully developed, how the hell can I think this in depth? No point in thinking about it repeatedly. Something else. If I'm a baby in the womb, would that mean that the bright light is my mother? What would that make the smaller one? A SIBL. Yes, a twin. A twin sibling. But what does that mean about the cold, hot one? Not dad, I'm sure as hell that biology doesn't work that way. This was the last thought I had before deciding to stew on it, for the time being. I had no want to continue nearly driving myself insane trying to find out what the hell's going on. Deciding to do something more productive, I began reciting every word, sentence, and phrase I knew that wasn't in my native tongue. But I needed more. I moved on to songs, film plots, and even philosophical works. But it wasn't enough, I needed something else. Something nice and totally not requiring a lot of thought. After doing this, and a great deal of other mental gymnastics to break up the monotony, something shifted. And by something, I mean myself. The small bright light, my sibling, and the light that I assumed was my mother, was flickering repeatedly. God, if you're listening, FCKU. Second, I don't want to remember being born. 3. Please don't let me be a girl. With that heartfelt prayer finished, I felt the third presence seemingly move. It had never done that before. After a truly traumatizing event that seemed to carry on for hours, I felt the air on my skin for the first time in this new life. Underscore. Let me tell you, being a tiny little thing, and covered in liquid. Within moments, I was shivering uncontrollably, even when I was dried off and bundled up into a blanket. It wasn't simply due to the cold that I was shivering, it was also the emptiness I felt from not having the warmth I've been so used to for the last several months of my to feel that warmth again. I reached out as I did before, feeling only a slight spark. Less than a couple feet of range. I thought to myself. I was shaken out of my thoughts when I heard a baby scream just a minute or two later. Trying to feel what was going on, I pushed my senses hard. I felt a headache building, but I could feel what was around me. I was being held by someone, the feeling felt similar, but not the same as my mother's. A woman, maybe. A few feet in front of me, I could feel my mother's presence, it felt diminished, but still burning bright. No surprise, she's just given birth. My mother, the person holding me, and my sibling had a certain feel to them that were similar. I think my sibling is a girl. I thought, before moving on to the only two other presences I was all too familiar with. It was the one that had been playing the part of a mysterious guest with me, my sister, and mother. It seemed to be stretching or pushing to expand, I'm not sure how to describe it. The second presence was what had me looking closely. It was different from the others. It didn't have the same feel to it as what my mother's was. But it felt slightly similar to my sister's. This must be my father. I thought. Thankful that my mother didn't have some deadbeat ditch her when she got pregnant. That's good. Upon closer inspection, I noticed something very peculiar. His presence seemed to move outside him and towards my mother and the unknown presence. Almost as if he were surrounding the unknown presence to hold it in place. Before I could think of what that might have meant, I felt something behind me for a split second and then the light holding me winked out of existence. I felt as if I were bathed in ice water at that instant. But that wasn't the worst part. I felt a spray of liquid that fell on my face. I didn't even need to think about what it was until I was hit with the smell of it like an out-of-control freight train. No. No. Not blood. I couldn't think. Could barely breathe. The last thing I smelled before I died. The thing that I choked on, was the first thing I smelled coming into this new life. I did the obvious thing an infant does when exposed to something terrifying to it, I screamed. The next few seconds, or was it minutes? Hours. To this day I can't say, it was sheer madness. One moment I was being held by a thing, the feeling to it was not human. Not the way my mother, sister, and father felt. The next, I felt myself in my father's arms, a wave of warmth attempting to calm me down. He spoke a few words that I could not understand. He was stopped in his attempt when the unknown presence, the one that was as much of a companion as my mother and sister, exploded. The feel to it before was like a localized inferno. But now, it felt like my own envisioning of hell. All-encompassing. All-powerful. Immortal. Drawing breath was a victory unto itself when in this demon's presence. I couldn't remember much but the fight to earn much-needed oxygen into my lungs until the presence seemed to vanish from my field of range. I assume I had been taken somewhere. I remember the cold feeling of a brush painting something on my stomach. My sister was beside me, I assume being given the same treatment as I was. The next moments were some of the worst I ever felt. I pulled back my sight as much as I could, so as not to feel the demon's presence, but it still didn't stop at all. I could feel it coming towards me and my sister. For the first time since my birth, I opened my eyes. What assaulted my vision is something I will never forget. A beast, one the size of a mountain, and 9 tails swishing behind it furiously, was roaring in fury, attempting to break free from a collection of glowing chains holding it down. I looked to see where the chains were coming from. I saw a woman with red hair, her face and body screaming exhaustion, with chains coming out of her body to hold the creature. To the left was a man with golden blonde hair, doing something that I couldn't even describe. There are times where someone is confronted with certain indisputable things. Even when they seem so unlikely as to court madness, one must still acknowledge when the option is true. I was in that situation. Nothing gives a man recently reborn a bigger madness check as seeing a real living Biju trying to kill you and your new family. Especially who your family was. No. Not possible. I thought, desperately trying to make sense of the impossible. You're not real. It can't be. You're ink on a page. No matter how much I tried to say that it wasn't real, they were still real. I knew what was about to happen, and I knew I was powerless to stop it. I should have shut my eyes, but I didn't. I couldn't help but see the catalyst event that would create a protagonist. Me. I thought. It all seemed to go in slow motion. The chains are weakening. A tail shooting forward. A shout of warning. It all came to where my baby sister and I were sitting, upon the cold ground outside of the village hidden in the leaves. I saw it all. The blood running down their faces. The soft smiles they gave me. The gentle words said in a language I didn't know enough to understand. And I cried. I cried as the Kyūbi was sheared in two. I cried as my sister was given one half. I screamed as the other half was sealed in me. Molten iron seeming to course in my blood. I cried as their light faded from my mind's eye. I cried out for anyone to save me from my pain. But not a soul answered. Not as my parents died. Not when the darkness, save for one bright spot, surrounded me. Not when unfamiliar people stole my last light from me. And not when the caustic chakra of the Kyūbi gnawed at my thoughts and dragged me into the realm of unconsciousness. Not a soul. After dismissing the nurse so she could get some sleep, and more importantly give Jiraiya privacy to work, Hiruzen approached the crib, looking at the sleeping children alongside his former student. They look like them, he said softly, so as not to wake them. The boy takes after his father by his looks, but has much of Kushina's coloring. The girl has Minato's hair, but Kushina's face. They stood there for a moment, the peaceful silence a welcome reprieve from the hectic nature of the hospital and the village outside. The silence stretched on for a moment until Hiruzen broke it with a question whose answer eluded him. Did they decide on names? He asked. I know they had a couple of ideas, but I knew of nothing concrete. Jiraiya stood silently for a moment, before answering his sensei. Rin, he said, pausing before giving the final part, and Naruto. He finished, voice hollow. The character from your book, Hiruzen stated, a wave of sadness making its presence known. Jiraiya voiced no response save for a slight tilting of his head in a nod. Your letter said there may have been something wrong with one of the seals. Which one? Jiraiya asked, wishing to address one of his current prime concerns. Hiruzen leaned forward, placing a hand gently on the boy, Naruto's, head. Naruto is different from his sister, and his mother for that matter, he replied, gazing upon the child's face. His chakra is tilted towards yin. This wouldn't be a concern for a child that wasn't an Uzumaki. But, as we both know, Uzumaki have more yang alignment for their chakra, much like the Akamaiki. Jiraiya nodded his understanding. Stepping forward to begin running a diagnostic on both children's seals, Jiraiya was thinking of potential possibilities of how this could happen. Yin alignment isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's common in the Uchiha clan. Even the Nara and Yamanaka clan use yin-heavy chakra in their clan techniques. He thought to himself. But he knew Naruto wasn't any of those. Exposure to the Kyūbi's chakra prenatally. Maybe. But why only him and not his sister? To the best of his knowledge, no female jinchūriki had ever birthed twins. Maybe that was why. One twin's chakra being influenced by one half of the Kyūbi and the other twin being affected by the other half. Yes, that could work. There's no issue with either seal, Jiraiya said, finishing his diagnostic on the seals. Minato seemed to have designed the seals to slowly let some of the Kyūbi's chakra drip into the two of them. It couldn't have been better designed. He finished, stepping back and flexing his fingers to get feeling back into them from his checking of the seals and brushing against a remnant of the Kyūbi's chakra still left over. Do you have any theories on how the chakra imbalance could have happened? He asked his sensei, hoping he had another theory that would make more sense than any of his. Phew, Hiruzen responded. And each one is more unlikely than the last. The most likely I can think of is that perhaps exposure to the Kyūbi's chakra caused his yin chakra to expand, outpacing his yang alignment. But it's only speculation until a more in-depth study can be done. We will have to wait until things have calmed down. Until we can bring a Hyuga to have a look, we won't know for certain. That was the best theory I had as well, Jiraiya stated, his tone then switching to a more guarded one. Which Hyuga will it be? I don't want word spreading about how children that resemble Minato are being given my attention. It's too dangerous right now. Hiruzen knew what Jiraiya meant. Too much bad blood still remained between Iwa and Konoha. If it were discovered that Minato had not one, but two children, with an Uzumaki mother, and both were jinchūriki, Iwa would resume conflict and Kumo would almost undoubtedly jump in, seeing the danger of letting Konoha have a few years of recovery. Pushing aside that very real possibility for now, Hiruzen calmed his student's concern with a raise of his hands. It will be one that is trustworthy, probably Hiyashi. We need to be very delicate about the situation, I agree. Jiraiya nodded to Hiruzen's choice. Hiyashi could be trusted. He and Minato had gone on many missions before when they were Chunin and some even when they were Jonin. It had helped them to become close friends. Hayashi would not break their trust. I assume you have an excuse cooked up for why I will be staying in the village for the time being? Jiraiya asked, his brow raised a bit in question. It would do no good for us to look suspicious. I need a reason for being around them. He gestured towards the children. As a matter of fact, I do. If people talk, I can head it off by announcing that it was the Yondaim's wish that the children be seen as heroic for their sacrifice. No one would think twice that you're ensuring your student's legacy, now would they? Jiraiya grinned at the plan. That'll work. The following weeks were hard on Hiruzen. Somehow, it had been leaked that the twins contained the Kyūbi within them, and it was a miracle that much of the villagers, and even some shinobi didn't rise up to try and kill them. Too many people were still grieving for their loved ones to look at things reasonably. With the rumor mill already giving false or misleading information, it was nearly impossible to clear up any of it. He had hoped, at the very least, posting some anbu to be seen would prevent some drunk from doing something he would regret. But it didn't stop a few fools hellbent on trying. A couple of drunken chunins attempted to sneak into the room that housed the twins. Getting rid of the demon spawn, a couple of the anbu had heard them going on about. My sister's a night shift nurse. She said that after one nurse, Akira I think, ends her shift, there's a small window open to get in. It'll take 2 of us to get in, he finished, his voice wavering from the alcohol. The 2 anbu radioed into the anbu charged with guarding the twin jinchūriki at the hospital, warning of a potential attack. Spotting their arrival at the hospital, the anbu guarding the twins got into position, ready to deliver death upon the 2 drunk shinobi. I won't lose another. The masked anbu thought to himself. Not even after taking half a step into the room, there was a soft whistle of metal cutting through the air, followed by a wet thunk, and the sound of 2 corpses hitting the ground. The 2 drunks were dead, a kunai buried hilt deep in both of their spinal columns. The next day, the hospital was down a nurse. None of the nurses knew what happened to her. Some assumed that she quit and left the village to be off to greener pastures after the tragic death of her brother from falling and breaking his neck after he staggered home from a bar. Anbu are considered to be capable, ruthless, and above all, got results. And Inu was one of the best. Hiruzen set down the ANBU's official report with an irritated sigh. It wasn't simply that he had to deal with civilians, and even a low-level shinobi or 2, talking about finishing what the Yondaime started. It wasn't that his anbu had to carry out more than one valid threat. He could deal with issues within his realm of expertise. But the medical report he had received not 2 hours before hearing the news from Inu of an attempted attack on the Uzumaki siblings in their hospital room was not something he could solve, even with his decades of experience in understanding chakra and the wonders and great destruction it was capable of bringing. The medical report was a difficult thing to understand. For Rin, it was normal, aside from an elevated chakra pool, no surprise there. But when it got to the point of Naruto, it was very strange indeed. As was suspected by both Hiruzen and Jiraiya, and later confirmed by Hiyashi's Byakugan, little Naruto had a chakra consistency that was naturally more yin than an Uzumaki should have. His yang aspect was potent, but his yin was even more so. When it was discovered that he had the yin half of the Kyūbi in his seal, it all made sense. The influx of yin chakra consistently fed into his chakra coils was making the difference dangerous. When a person is in possession of a yang-dominant chakra system, their physical prowess is generally higher. This is seen with the Akamaiki clan, the Senju, and the Uzumaki. Individuals who are in possession of a dominant chakra system generally have a more esoteric collection of potential jutsus. The Uchiha and their eyes, the Hyuga, the Nara, with their shadow-binding techniques, and the Yamanaka with their ability to project their consciousness outside their bodies. Where the danger lay, was so much yin chakra being dripped into young Naruto's fragile system. An overabundance of yang chakra would make the person more physically robust, but could lead to an overdeveloped appetite and potentially hyperactive behavior. But an overabundance of yin chakra, especially in one so young, could lead to malformations in the brain and potential personality issues. Minato had no way of knowing that his son would have a stronger yin level than an Uzumaki should, even before the Kyūbi's yin half was sealed. If the boy's alignment was a normal yang level like his sister, it wouldn't be an issue. Jiraiya tightened the seal as much as he could without damaging the seal's ability, but it wasn't a guarantee that issues will not arise in the next few years. They could only wait and see what the future held for the young boy. Uzumaki Naruto was having a bad day. Or at least, one worse than most. The 5, almost 6-year-old had just returned to the orphanage from his weekly medical checkup at Konoha's hospital. Most of what was said each week went over his head. But by the looks of concern and hushed whispers when they noticed him listening, it wasn't good news this week. Every week he would talk to a kind-spoken man with long blonde hair, almost like Rin's, whose name was Inoichi, about the headaches he would sometimes get. He told the man about how he had the nightmare that he couldn't breathe, no matter how much he tried, and the whole world would fade to black, again. It was a recurring dream that he had when his mind would get fuzzy. Why does this keep happening to me? Why doesn't it happen to Rin? Why do I have trouble with people understanding me? It's not fair. He was forcefully driven out of his thoughts when he didn't notice his escort had stopped and walked straight into her, bounced off her, and promptly fell on his behind. Pay attention, we're here, the lady snapped. She didn't like having to escort the brat from the orphanage to its little, mind-healing, appointments. More like showing the demon how to be human. The other one at least knew how to act like a human, even if it was hyperactive to the nth degree. The brat's appointments would give the caretakers at the orphanage a reprieve from its crazy yammering nonsense, and odd behavior. And she sadly drew the short stick on who would escort the little beast. Bitch, he muttered using a word that only he seemed to understand. What was that? The lady asked, with a faux sweet tone of voice. Knowing it was using a word it loved to use around her. Nothing, he replied quietly, not wanting another lesson on what happens when he speaks. Crazy talk. Good, now go on inside, she said sweetly, gesturing towards the orphanage in front of them. Naruto wasted no time in getting away from the witch lady and to go find his sister. They had lunch with Gigi today and he couldn't wait for it. Where is he? He should have been back an hour ago. We're going to be late. Uzumaki Rin thought to herself. Her irritation causes her to pace back and forth in the small room shared by her and her brother Naruto. If he's not back, Gigi's going to have to wait. Rin didn't want the old man to have to wait on the two of them. She didn't know if Naruto noticed, but she did. The Hokage seemed more exhausted, less energetic when he would take them on their trip to the ramen stand. She may not be able to hold still for very long, or avoid being loud and being an absolute terror to the caretakers at the orphanage, but she was still very perceptive. Something had happened within the last few months. Something that seemed to prematurely age the old man almost overnight. What happened, Gigi? She thought to herself. Worried about the man she saw as her grandfather. She was drawn out of her contemplation when she felt, more than heard, an all too familiar presence making its way up the stairs to her room. He's back. She didn't have to wait more than a few seconds before a yellow and red blur engulfed her into a hug. I'm back. Her brother nearly shouted in her ear, lifting her off her feet and twirling her around. Put me down, Ruto, she giggled, trying to pry herself from his grip. We're going to be late. We don't want to keep Gigi waiting. At the mention of the man's name, Naruto set her down, grin still not leaving his face. Okay. Let me change my shirt first. At the mention of the article of clothing, Rin noticed there was a noticeable stain on the front. What happened? She asked. That was odd. Naruto normally was careful about spilling things. He started, putting his hand behind his neck embarrassedly. I sort of wasn't careful when I was talking to Inoichi. And I, kind of, knocked over my juice. He finished, flushed slightly in embarrassment. Okay, I'll be downstairs waiting for Gigi. Be quick, she said. As she made her way out of the room, she looked back by the corner of the doorway in the hallway and saw her brother looking for where his other shirt was. Why doesn't he remember where he put his shirt? She thought, as she made her way downstairs. It's one of those days, she realized. It is better now than it was last year. Her brother, on most days, was normally the one playing the role of elder sibling. He would console her when the villagers were particularly mean, and when the children in the orphanage would distance themselves away from them. With a look of fear or hatred on their days, he would look back, not breaking eye contact until the children did. He also would fix any adult that was rude to her with a look of unmatched hatred, whether it be the caretakers, or villagers they saw when at the park. He was her light, her protector. But today seemed to be one of those days where he would get confused easily, overlook things, and would act much differently than what he normally did. He would start speaking words that others didn't understand, but she did. She understood the most when he would start speaking strangely. Twinspeak, Gigi would call it. Another language that twins use. But those weren't words that she helped Naruto come up with. He already knew them, he just taught her what the words meant. She never did tell the Hokage that detail. Those days were also when she had to be what Naruto normally was to her. Gigi asked me to tell him if I noticed when Naruto would have these days. I'll tell him at lunch, when Naruto can't hear. She hated keeping this secret from her brother. It felt almost like she was betraying him. But she knew the Hokage meant well. He cared very deeply for the two of them, and only wanted the best for them. Making her way downstairs, she went to the door to sit on the steps until the Hokage arrived. She looked out to the street, watching the normal hustle and bustle of a shinobi village. She tried to ignore some of the looks she received from some of the passerbys. She didn't get those looks when she was with the Hokage, and she could shake them off when Naruto was with her, giving her support. Hurry up, she thought, before she heard her brother come down the stairs. Walking out to the steps, he sat down next to her, wearing a clean red shirt. Gigi here yet? He asked, looking across the street to the village outside. Not yet, Rin replied, he should be here in a few minutes, it's almost noon. After a minute of silence, Rin decided to broach a subject she knew her brother wouldn't want to talk about. How was your appointment? She asked, wanting to know what the kind blonde man had said to Naruto about his problem. She noticed him tense slightly before responding. It was all good. It's getting better, he said, the slight tightness in his tone acting like a flare to one who knew him as well as she did. Brother, she quietly requested, switching to the language he seemed to invent, please don't lie to me. I don't like it when you keep secrets from me. She tried to ignore the guilt at the hypocrisy she was showing. Naruto closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He didn't like worrying her about problems that were his. It didn't seem right. Okay, he exhaled, speaking in the language he had known for as long as he could remember. I had the dream again, the one where I can't breathe. Inoichi said that it wasn't a huge problem. A bump in the road, is what he said. He said it won't change anything, it will be fixed in a year. At the look his sister gave him, Naruto put his hands up in a placating manner. That's all he said, switching back the language normally spoken. It won't change a thing, I'm getting better. He finished, offering his hand to his sister to take. Rin looked at the hand for a moment, before grasping a hold of it, a relaxed smile upon her face. Okay, she said quietly, remember I'll always be here for you, K. Naruto smiled back, leaning into her shoulder. Me too. He said simply, before looking back towards the village, waiting for the man he saw as his grandfather to arrive. The last few years had been rough for Sarutobi Hiruzen. Taking up the burden of Hokage again at his age was difficult enough. And the job did not fail to deliver. The Kyūbi attack and its aftermath. The concessions he needed to make to the civilian merchants and businessmen to get an influx of funding to clear away debris and get repairs done quickly. The Hyuga incident with Kumo less than 2 years ago. The further disenfranchisement of the Uchiha clan with the rest of the village. But the worst was the one that he did have power over. One that he could have stopped, but didn't have the strength to do it. Orochimaru, he thought, the very name driving a spike of shame through his heart. After everything I saw that he had done. The experiments, the innocent lives, his apprentice. I still couldn't help but see the precocious orphan I tried to help when he lost what no child should. I encouraged his curiosity. I stoked the flames that overwhelmed his sense of going too far. I let him flee. I couldn't kill the person I saw weeping at his parents' death, his whole world ending around him. At least something is better, he muttered to himself as he made his way to the orphanage. His thoughts shifted to a less depressing subject, the Uzumaki twins that he saw as his surrogate grandchildren. They'll be starting in the academy next year, he mused. Time does seem to fly. He got to the end of the street, spotting the orphanage at the corner. On the steps, he could see the two he had come to collect. As he approached, he saw Rin perk up and whisper into her brother's ear, probably that she had spotted him, given that her brother sat up, looked around, and saw him a scant moment later. Gigi, they both shouted at the same time, as he closed the gap between them. He stifled a chuckle as they rushed to engulf him into a hug. I heard some strange rumor that 2 children were hungry for some ramen. Do you know who that could be? He asked, trying to maintain a facade of seriousness and failing miserably. Us, Gigi, they answered, again at the same time. Oh really? He feigned ignorance, that must mean, he continued, putting a hand to his goatee, stroking it thoughtfully, that must mean you're the ones I came for. He finished, unable to hide his grin. Gigi. The twins whined, not wanting to be teased any further. All right, let an old man have his jokes. Now, are you ready? He asked, as they let go of his waist to look up at him. Yes, they both, again, copied each other precisely. In both body language, and the giggling they let loose. In that moment, Hiruzen saw so much of their parents seem to shine through them. He saw so much of Kushina in her daughter, her eyes the most. And he may as well be looking into the past when looking at the boy, who aside from his hair, looked the spitting image of his father. Down to the very grin he had on his face. Let's go now, he said happily, walking towards Ichiraku's with the children in tow. Minato, Kushina. You would be so proud of your children. And the love they have for one another. One of those days, again, you say. Hiruzen asked, his expression giving nothing away. They had finished eating at Ichiraku's and were back at the front of the orphanage. Naruto had said his goodbye and entered the orphanage to use the restroom, leaving the Hokage and Rin alone for a minute. Yes, she said quietly, he tried to hide it. But he can't hide it from me. He noticed she wanted to say something else, but looked like she decided not to. I can tell you have a question, he said softly, knowing it must be something that was bothering her greatly. Don't feel scared, I'll answer as best I can. Rin looked up to him, he could see tears already forming in her eyes. When will he get better? She asked, more like begged, him, her voice cracking with emotion. He's supposed to be my big B brother. He protects me, and I protect him. Why does he act like he doesn't know me sometimes? When will he stop acting so different? Hiruzen finished, seeing how much it was hurting her to speak about it. She simply nodded with a sniffle and a hiccup. He will be fine by the time you two enroll into the academy, Hiruzen explained, pulling her into a hug. His chakra was imbalanced when you two were born. But it's getting much better. Don't worry Rin, he will never forget you. Don't ever let anyone, even yourself, convince you he will abandon you. He finished softly, stroking her hair gently. After a minute of them standing there, Rin felt calmed down enough to let go of him. Thank you, Gigi, she whispered quietly. Never think you can't talk to me about your worries, Rin. My door is always open. He told her. He always did love their visits to his office. Even when it distracted him from his work, it didn't bother him in the slightest. Rin gave a small smile and a nod before turning to enter the orphanage. And Rin, Hiruzen called, Rin's stride being slightly halted. There's no need for you to keep secrets from your brother. With that, Rin opened the door to the orphanage, her posture noticeably more relaxed, and entered. Before the door even closed completely, Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime of Konoha, disappeared in a shunshin, a small swirl of leaves left in his wake. The following week marked a very special day for the twins. It was their 6th birthday. The Hokage had arrived at the orphanage early in the day and had given them a collection of gifts. The gifts included a set of blunted kunai, so they would be familiar with the feel of them by the time they were enrolled into the academy, coupons for a few free orders of ramen from Ichiraku's, and a toad wallet for Naruto. Hiruzen hated taking credit for that one. A book on wildlife in the land of fire for Rin, she loved animals. And finally, a copy of The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi, by Jiraiya the Sannin. Hiruzen barely held back a grimace when the two thanked him for the amazing book. I wish you could have delivered it to them yourself, Jiraiya. He moved his thoughts from that for now. Today was about twins. After they finished trying out their presents for a bit, Hiruzen told them he planned on treating them to Ichiraku's and a trip to the dango shop later. They jumped in excitement at the thought of not just ramen, but dango as well, on their birthday. So caught up in their excitement, they didn't see the small flash of sadness appear on Hiruzen's weathered face. I need to have it all done before the festival begins. Before the preparations even. He put on a happy face, and continued giving a bit of a family feel to a special day for two special children. Naruto woke up the next day, refreshed and feeling lighter than he had in a long time. After Gigi had dropped him and Rin off back to the orphanage, the two had spent the rest of the day reading the book by Jiraiya, and acting out some of the scenes, to which they broke down into giggles every time they tried, and failed, to do different voices. They got several angry looks from the matrons from the racket they caused, but screwed them. Why should they care what those witches thought? Stretching his arms and releasing a jaw-cracking yawn, he slowly maneuvered his way out of bed, mindful of his sister still asleep right beside him. Ever since they were babies, they shared a bed. The close proximity brought a warmth to him he couldn't put into words. He always thought of a bright, warm fire. It wasn't something he could put into words. It almost felt spiritual how right it felt. Once he was out of bed, Rin only shifted slightly in her sleep. He headed over to the small closet they shared. The room they had was a little bigger than the other rooms, but it was more isolated than all the others. Reaching into the closet, he grabbed one of the books Gigi had given them. The book written by Jiraiya was the one he grabbed. He walked back to the center of the room, sat on the floor, and began reading. This was how Rin found him an hour later when she woke up. Ruto, she said clearly, sitting up, trying to rub the sleep out of her eyes, what are you doing? She asked, before yawning. Morning sleepyhead, he said cheekily, before answering her question. Reading, he said simply, this book by Jiraiya is really good. Did you know the hero, Naruto, is such a good guy. Even when he was in a tough spot, he sti. Stop. I don't want to hear what happens next. Rin responded, hands up, and all drowsiness seemed to vanish from her. I want to read it myself. Naruto simply responded with a sheepish grin, realizing that she wouldn't appreciate having any of the book's details spilled. Why are you reading that anyway? Rin asked. I thought we were going to read it together. A look of confusion marring her face. Well, Naruto started, putting a hand on the back of his neck, I couldn't get back to sleep and I didn't want to wake you up. Breakfast isn't starting for another 15 minutes, he said as he looked at the clock beside the bed, and I didn't have anything else to do. What about reading my book? Naruto responded to this very maturely by making retching sounds and fake spasming. What's wrong with my book? She demanded, leaping from the bed and fixing her brother with a glare. It has pictures of birds, wolves, rabbits, and all the other animals here, with little cards with facts about them. Oh, there's nothing wrong with your book, he said, a devilish smirk appearing on his face that she did not like. If you're a girl. Rin put her hands on her hips and had a glare that could bore through stone if it could, aimed straight at her brother who still had that annoying smirk on his face. He did not just say that. Do you want to take that back? She asked, oh so sweetly. Nope. He said, popping the pea, before blowing a loud raspberry at her. With a growl borderline animal, she leapt forward and tackled her brother to the ground, trying to pin him. Take it back. Take it back. Take it back. She shouted, golden blonde hair going askew. The only thing she got out of him was a mixture of snickers and giggles, which only succeeded in provoking her ire even further. Grr, she growled, trying to hold him down, hold still. Never. He shouted, pushing her slightly off him to get room to maneuver. The next 10 minutes involved the two siblings attempting to wrestle the other into submission, until it eventually degenerated into a tickle fight, and neither side won. After they had calmed down, they headed down to the dining area for breakfast. Both would have preferred ichirakus with Gigi. But they knew the Hokage was busy and couldn't take them every single day. The man did what he could, and it was much more than most of the other adults did. Entering the dining area hand in hand, the twins each grabbed a plate and entered the line awaiting breakfast for today. Seeing what was his soon-to-be sustenance for the morning, Naruto snorted. Rice. Always rice. Every single day. Doesn't matter if there is cow, pig, fish, or any other kind of meat or vegetables with it. Always. Rice. He never did like rice that much. Don't get him wrong, food was food. But no matter how much he and his sister got, they could always eat more. Not that the orphanage workers even gave them the same amount of food as the other children. It wasn't a great deal less, but it was still less. Even when they devoured several bowls of ramen, they could still always eat more. A scoop of rice hit his plate with a wet plop, causing a few bits to fall off the plate. A slice of dry fish to its left, a serving of soggy vegetables to its right made up his breakfast. Giving a snort at the sight of his bountiful harvest, he sat in their own corner, away from the stares and glares of the other children. After they ate their food, and the rest of the children left to do their own little things, Naruto and Rin decided to head to the park. It was relaxing, even if they received more glares because the Hokage wasn't with them, and with the Kyūbi festival happening just a day before causing the glares to be more intense, with the extra add-on of muttering just loud enough for the two to hear. Devil spawn and demon twins being the most common. No idea why their presence would cause such emotions and insults. But still, they made sure they had their time of relaxation, Rin with her book, comparing the pictures of the birds with their real-life counterparts. And Naruto looking at the sheer joy on his sister's face, along with giving glances towards some of the other children and parents at the park. Some of the parents returned looks of contempt. Others had neutral expressions. But the few that showed something more than neutral, bordering on friendly, almost all had something else in common. They looked familiar. The first time he had seen them at the park, they looked familiar. The days where many of them would be there, along with children who looked like their own and were familiar in their own way, happened to coincide on some occasions when his mind would fog over. Names, faces, voices, they would seem to float into the forefront of his mind, only to vanish not long after. It was irritating. He felt like a part of him that he couldn't connect to was being teased in front of him, only to be snatched away. On bad days, he would catch himself not recognizing Rin's face. Rin. His own sister. The moment she even said one word though, normally his name, it would snap him out of it. Her voice was unforgettable. It was her voice. No one else's. It grounded him when his thoughts floated. Eventually it got late in the day, the parents calling for their children to come to them, for it was time to leave. No one called his name or Rin's name. After a short while since the last of the children left, the two jinchūriki of Konoha packed up the little things they brought with them, preparing to return to the orphanage. Giving a final look at a swing that seemed to look so familiar with the backdrop behind it, Naruto shrugged it off and continued on with his sister, back to the closest thing to a home they had. What's wrong, Rin? You can tell me. Naruto had noticed that Rin was very quiet on their way back from the park. Her demeanor continued even when they had reached the orphanage and were in their room. Something wasn't right. She wouldn't be this quiet for that long unless she was worried about something, hiding something, or both. Rin just looked at him silently, a look of apprehension, and was that fear too, he couldn't tell. Do you love me? She asked, her voice seemingly smaller than what one would expect from the headstrong girl. Yes, of course I do, Rin, he replied, as if it were something as obvious as the sky being blue. Why are you asking? Would you still love me if I kept a secret from you? She asked, her voice still too small to fit her. Why are you asking this? He asked her, a streak of worry underlining his voice. You're scaring me. This isn't funny. She started, but she stopped herself for a moment. She was scared of how he would react. Please, he begged, wanting to know what worried his sister. I told Gigi about your dream, she said, almost at a rapid pace, trying to say it as quickly as possible. One of the things Naruto had always hated was feeling like a burden. He hated the fog that would obscure his mind, forcing his sister to do what he as her brother should be doing. Another thing he hated, being pitied. He saw the looks from the nurses at the hospital. If it wasn't the usual hate like the villagers, it was a pity. The poor child, getting lost in his mind. Such a shame, were the common words he heard. He couldn't fathom how they thought he couldn't hear them, it was so obvious. They may as well be talking right next to him. Hell, he could smell what perfume they had on. If they were close enough for that, then they're too close. Even Inoichi, on his first few visits with him, had faint looks of pity shine through when his mind would drift and he would say something in the language no one could understand aside from Rin. Come to think of it, is that why Gigi took him and Rin to get ramen? Did he do it out of pity? For him. His breath quickened at the thoughts running riot in his head. He slowly backed away from his sister, looking at her differently than before. Naru, she started, reaching out for him, before being interrupted by a frantic Naruto. No. No, he flailed his hands out to keep her from touching him. You lied to me. You said no secrets. You said no secrets. He finished the last part in a whisper, almost as if it was to himself. Naruto, please, she begged, I'm sore. No, he shouted, jumping away from her. You lied to me, he snarled. Why? Gigi asked me to let him know when your mind would fog, she cried, tears running down her face. The venomous look she was receiving from her brother was something she'd only seen when one of the caretakers or a villager said something disparaging about her specifically. Never when it was both of them. She had never been on the receiving end of his fury, it had always been on her behalf. Naruto was in freefall. His thoughts were sluggish. His thinking was focused all on one thing, and it was right in front of him. She lied, he thought. She told Gigi about my mind. He pities me. The villagers hate me. Gigi pities me, like a stray cat needing milk. A pet. And Rin, his baby sister. His light in the darkness. His one bright spot. She lied to him. Betrayed his trust. Abandoned him. A massive tale. A shout of warning. Lights winking out of existence. Darkness. I can't breathe. I can't see her. Her light is gone. She's gone. If Naruto had not assumed what Rin was trying to say. If his own fear of being alone wasn't being fed by what he perceived as validation of his own nightmare, he could have been reasoned with. He could have been able to see that the Hokage was Inoichi's boss. Inoichi answered him. The Hokage would know about his problems with his mind. The dream. He was probably only asking Rin because she could understand how much it hurt her brother to know he could become trapped, with no escape, save for waiting till it went away. But he was past the point of reason. Rin saw her brother's face slack as he backed away from her. The slight tilt of his head, that familiar tilt that she feared, was more noticeable than ever. Like a spooked deer, he turned to run. Before she could even call his name, to try and bring him back, he spoke. He spoke a single sentence that brought her emotions to an uncontrollable level. I don't know you. Barely more than a whisper. His eyes were looking straight into hers. But he seemed to be staring 1,000 miles past. As if she wasn't even there. They almost seemed to flash to a shade of violet not dissimilar to her own. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her pale, cold, and an icy dagger seemed to find its way into her soul. He will never forget you. Don't ever let anyone, even yourself, convince you he will ever abandon you. Those words rang through her head as she saw her brother tense like a cornered animal. She could barely think. She tried to find words to say, to pull him back from his mind. But she couldn't. She couldn't find any. She tried to reach for him, to hopefully stop him. With a speed that seemed to defy human convention on how fast a 6-year-old ought to be, he bolted from the room, down the stairs and through the door, breaking it off its hinges. Rin couldn't reach him, couldn't see where he went. And she collapsed to the floor, alone, unable to stand, trapped in her own living nightmare. The caretakers didn't pay mind to the anguished wails they heard in the night. Arriving at the park in a blur of red and gold, Naruto fell to the ground, vomiting what was still left of his supper from earlier in the evening. Night had fallen and only a few villagers were even milling about. A few saw him blur by, probably not even recognizing him. Wiping the foul mess from his mouth, he still remained on his hands and knees, trying to pull his thoughts together. He had felt something crack. A wave of memories had hit him that seemed so familiar. He felt a phantom pain through his body. Almost like liquid iron working its way through. A few little lines of words he hadn't known, hadn't invented, also began floating to the forefront of his rapidly clearing mind. Carpe diem. Ils ne passeront pas. Storge. Agape. They were words he never heard, but he still knew what they meant in his very bones. After trying for an unknown amount of time, he managed to calm himself enough to think a little clearer. The fog was still there, but his mind felt more whole. More than it had in years. Trying to push through it, he was able to decipher and break down what had caused him to flee. She was telling me she told Gigi about my dream. A stab of pain went through his head. Why would she do that? Did she not trust me to tell him eventually? Why? An errant thought crossed his mind. A thought that now, only after he was away from the situation, made its way to the front of his thoughts. Gigi is the Hokage. He's the boss of the whole village. That means he's Inoichi's boss. You're supposed to tell your boss what is going on. Gigi already knew, before Rin told him. Why would he ask her for details? It doesn't make sense. I saw the writing on Inoichi's little notepad when he grabbed a glass of juice for me, and when I spilled it, he grabbed several napkins from another room. It had to be to the Hokage. As Naruto worked through the thought that had taken possession over him, frightened by what it meant. Rin told him because he cares for me. He doesn't trust Inoichi's words as much as mine. He wants to know I'm safe. Rin. He stopped when he thought of his sister. I've seen the look in her eyes before. The fear when I couldn't recognize her face. The relief when I knew her voice. She's scared I won't remember her. He realized. And I said, I don't know you. Naruto, you idiot. You really did it this time, moron. He realized he needed to get back, now. Tell Rin how sorry he was. That he wouldn't leave her, he loved her. Trying to stand up, he staggered before falling back down. My legs hurt. My whole body aches. He couldn't understand why. His whole body, and his legs especially, felt like something had burned its way through his muscles. He could feel them getting a little better, but he didn't know when he'd be able to walk steadily to the point he could get back to the orphanage. Please don't come looking for me. Prayed. Gigi had said for them not to be out in the village at nightfall. Bad people come out at night, he said. But Naruto thought there was more to it, not simply because of nighttime. Was it dangerous at night for everyone? Or just them? He continued to lay on the ground at the park, letting the ache in his limbs slowly fade away. He didn't know how long he was there. It could have been a few minutes. It could have been an hour. He just sat there stewing in his thoughts, wondering what he was going to say to apologize to Rin. Hearing a slight rustling of leaves, he turned and saw someone he wasn't expecting, the caretaker who had escorted him to his appointment 2 weeks ago. The bitch. Oh, thank goodness I found you, she exclaimed, a look of relief on her face. Nobody knew where you went and we've been looking for you. That was odd. Normally she was never this polite. What was going on? Why are you here? He asked, suspicion lacing his tone. Was this the same woman who was terrible to him and his sister? At the suspicion coming from the boy, she seemed to shift into a more aggravated stance. Your sister is in the hospital, she said simply, no politeness in her tone. Naruto's brows shot upwards, a look of shock on his face. What happened? He asked frantically. She was screaming and wouldn't calm down. They had to take her to the hospital to be sedated, the woman answered, giving a slight glare towards the boy. It's my fault. Naruto thought. I wasn't there to calm her down. I did this. Take me to her, he begged her, please. The woman looked at him for a moment before answering, you will stay close to me and not move any slower. Do you understand? Naruto nodded his understanding, before forcing himself to his feet to follow her to the hospital. Had he been thinking more about her off-character introduction, instead of his guilt over his sister, he might have suspected something. He might also have noticed her slightly different posture. And he might have noticed her gait was different when he tried to keep pace with her longer strides if he wasn't thinking of the ache in his legs. But he noticed nothing. Tunnel-visioned as he was to help his sister. I can't believe it worked. The disguised shinobi thought. He had changed into the form of one of the caretakers at the orphanage to get the brat to drop his guard. He had copied the voice and the tone to sell it further, but that's where he almost screwed up. The boy looked at him like he had grown a second head before adopting a look of guarded caution. He was fortunate to have thought quickly on his feet and shifted the tone to a more rude one. She evidently hates the kid, and he assumes bitchiness from her. After selling some BS about his sister, you could have heard the crying from over a block away. Being in the hospital, the boy dropped all caution to only be replaced by a look of fear, and was that guilt. Oh, even better. Setting the pace, the shinobi quickly outpaced the boy, forcing him to grimace from keeping up with the larger man's stride. They were within 100 yards of the hospital entrance when the shinobi veered to the right, into an alley alongside the entrance. Wah! The boy started, confused by the change of entrance. Before realizing something was very wrong. Turning to look at him, the boy's face twisted into a look of hatred at the realization of deceit. Where is she? He growled, pulling a kunai from the pouch on his thigh. Noticing that the kunai was a blunted one for training, the mysterious shinobi chuckled at the boy's audacity. Nothing personal, kid. Just business. With that, the boy's chakra spiked, his eyes flickering from blue to violet, and he charged him, murder in his eyes. Too easy. He thought, as the boy overextended his stab, giving the man the perfect opportunity to drive a knee into the boy's sternum. The boy nearly folded over his leg from the impact. He hit the ground, hard, coughing and trying to get air back into his lungs. Orders are orders. Get the kid worked up and sick him on the hospital, making old man Hokage look like he's slipping. Like I said kid, nothing personal. Making hand signs, he cast his choice of genjutsu. Demonic illusion. Hell viewing technique. The moment the genjutsu took effect, the boy clutched his head and started screaming uncontrollably, gibbering words that were untranslatable from what he was trying to say. Now, just wait till he breaks. He thought, hoping it was quick. The screaming will attract unwanted attention. Almost as if fate was listening, he spotted an Anbu closing in, rapidly. Shit, I can't fight that bastard. Not a chance. As he was prepping to cut his losses and flee, a spike of visible chakra blasted out of the boy, distracting him and the Anbu for a second. Both thought that was the end of it as the Anbu got closer. They were very wrong. A scream of pain. A blast of purple chakra. A shockwave that knocked both to their backs, ears ringing. The Anbu looked like he got it worse. He was clutching at his eyes and was struggling to get up, like a drunk staggering home. The Anbu or the kid? Thinking quickly, the man pulled a kunai and flung it at the kid, his aim true, knowing the Anbu may be able to prevent a fatal strike to himself. He saw it in slow motion. The kunai flying, making contact, the soft thunk of it striking flesh, the boy falling to his back, and the kunai lodged in his chest. He turned to stagger away, but was struck by something that speared a hole through his shoulder and out his back. The boy had a spike of what looked to be chakra coming from him that was a golden color. What is this? The man thought, not recognizing what the hell it was. As fast as it appeared, it disappeared, leaving a boy in the middle of a dark alley, choking on his own blood. Gritting his teeth, the man fled as fast as his injured state would allow, before the Anbu could recover. I better get paid extra for this. I hate night shifts. Uchiha Itachi decided. Having recently become an Anbu, he still needed to go through some of the lesser missions that all other rookies had to do before being one of the group. One of those missions was playing watch over the Uzumaki twins. Daytime wasn't so difficult. It mostly involved watching them play at the park or venture very lightly into the forest surrounding the village. Not too bad. It was refreshing to see two children be happy in spite of all the hatred they received from the village. In the boy, he saw a bit of himself. That protectiveness and fierce love that he had for his sister was something that touched Itachi's heartstrings. I love Sasuke. He thought, his thoughts shifting to his little brother who was about the same age as the twins, come to think of it. He resigned himself to a long night, knowing he could have avoided it, but had decided not. Inu had been injured on a prior mission. And while he was medically fit to do the job, he still was moving a little gingerly with a barely perceptive limp. Cracked ribs and a dislocated ankle take time to heal, even with chakra. He mused. He had to offer to take up Inu's shift to watch the twin jinchūriki. Inu wouldn't give up and asked. He would have dealt with it. That offer of kindness seemed to have been either a good choice or a bad one, as he could hear shouting from the room, even when he was on the adjacent building's roof. This isn't good, he thought as he felt a slight spike of chakra, before seeing the boy fleeing the orphanage like a wild biju was on his heels. I'd best follow him. Channeling chakra to his legs, he ran to the edge of the roof, leaping across the street to the other side, hopping from rooftop to rooftop trying to locate where the boy was headed. The boy eventually stopped at the park, collapsing from exhaustion, by the looks of it. Did he mean to channel that much chakra into his legs? Chakra enhancement wasn't something to take lightly. If you don't do it often, giving your muscles the opportunity to strengthen themselves to the chakra's potential effects, you could damage something. Looks like he didn't. That's more chakra than many Chunin's channels. He saw the boy lay on the ground, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. He sat there for maybe 10 minutes, before Itachi spotted something 100 yards or so out from the park's boundary. It looked like one of the caretakers from the orphanage. He was ready to intervene when the look of suspicion appeared on the strawberry blonde's face, but stayed his hand when the woman said something that caused the boy's face to do a complete shift to one of alarm. The boy and woman left, with Itachi playing invisible watcher to the two. He followed them and deduced that based on the route they were taking, they were headed to the hospital. Why? There was no reason to go. The boy looked much better in how he walked from what was even just a few minutes ago. That would have taken a couple days for anyone else. He thought. Is that because of his tenant? Or a bloodline ability? His mind switched to its combat form when he saw the woman lead the boy down an alley right beside the hospital and drop a henge. Sharing and active, he dove off the roof and landed with a slight crouch, bolting forward with his blade drawn from his sheath. The unknown assailant saw him, and by the man's look, he knew he was outclassed. 50 yards. 35. 20. Before he could get any closer, there was a colossal blast of potent chakra that felt like a flash bang had gone off in his head from his eyes picking up the chakra. Stumbling from the temporary vision impairment, Itachi tried to advance further only for a second even more intense blast knocked him to the ground, ears ringing. I can't see. He shouted in his mind. His whole vision has gone white from being so close to the jinchūriki. Ears still ringing, he deactivated his Sharingan to hopefully see better. It was still bad, but he could see their silhouettes now. Trying to get back to his feet, he saw the mysterious man pull a kunai, ready to throw. Itachi put up a hand, ready to block it. Better a hole in my hand than my chest. But it never came. He threw it at the boy. Watching the boy collapse backwards was one of the worst things he could envision. He had failed. Before he could even hope to be able to mount a pursuit, the assailant had already vanished into the night. Rushing to the boy's fallen form, he checked where the wound was located. It was bad. The kunai had gone through his left lung and he was struggling to draw breath. Itachi's vision was still blurred, but he could see enough of the boy's face to know what his thoughts were. Terror. His eyes were full of horror at the realization of how he was dying. His choking, rasping breathing was getting worse by the moment. The boy grabbed at Itachi's face weakly, not recognizing his masked guardian. It's okay, I'm here. You're safe, he whispered to him, not unlike how he would console Sasuke when he had nightmares when he was younger. The boy eventually calmed his grabbing at Itachi's face, but then started trying to grab at the kunai in his chest. Itachi grabbed his hand, stopping him. No, don't. You'll make it worse, he said. I need to get you to the hospital. Despite the boy trying to rasp out a protest, Itachi hoisted him up, carrying him out of the alley. Not yet, the boy rasped, barely meeting the definition of a whisper, not yet. Not ready. Itachi looked him straight in the eyes, seeing something flash within them. He could only describe it as more, behind those blue orbs. More than what he would have thought a 6-year-old could be in possession of. By the time Itachi had staggered into the hospital, Naruto's eyes had rolled up into his head, his body going slack. Medic! Itachi shouted, grabbing multiple people's attention at the sight of a uniformed Anbu holding a child covered in blood. 6 years old with a kunai wound to the chest. I need help now. Multiple medics rushed to him, grabbing the boy from his arms and taking him into the medi-nins to try and save him. Itachi watched as they carried him away, a feeling of numbness hitting him. Collapsing into a chair, he reached into his pocket to radio in what happened. Flicking it on, he only heard a faint crackle be emitted from it. Broken. From the chakra blast. Dragging himself to his feet, trying to ignore the pounding in his eyes and slight ringing in his ears, he exited the hospital and shunshined to the Hokage Tower. To deliver the dark news of what had befallen one of Konoha's children. After what seemed like an eternity, my thoughts broke the surface. I was no longer drowning. After the Kyūbi had been sealed into me, I was out of it. Incoherent, my thoughts and memories scrambled, I wasn't able to remember most things past a certain age. I was probably in a similar psychological stage that I was when I was about 8 or 9. Most of the time. The first few days, I was mostly lucid. Minus a bit of confusion, I was mostly fine. Then someone tightened something on my gut, likely the seal, meaning Jiraiya, come to think of it. Before the seal had been tightened, most of my thoughts and memories were still reachable. Some of them felt more like implants, but they were still there. When I would force myself into a state of anger, or at least as angry as an infant can get, more clarity would enter my mind, with the memories feeling more real. My most likely theory was that a decent part of the yin chakra that represented my personality was dragged by the sheer volume of the Kyūbi into the seal. Looking back, that was likely what occurred, especially with the conversation I had just overheard between a very familiar voice and one that I could recognize anywhere. Yin instability since infancy, only to be seemingly cured by a genjutsu and a kunai to my chest. I remembered very clearly the thoughts and words I had said to my sister, drawing a feeling of guilt from it. I can't imagine what she's going through right now. I think the trauma of what was shown with the genjutsu, and the near-death experience caused the seal tightening to either loosen or maybe even break, causing a sizable chunk of yin chakra to break loose, rejoining the greater portion, fixing most of the disjointed thoughts, and hopefully mind fog. Can't really have a lot of coherency when you have no context for the memories. That genjutsu hurt more than the kunai. Don't get me wrong, I didn't exactly enjoy the reenactment of my original death. But I'd already lived that. I felt that. Died from that. The genjutsu showed the child version of myself his worst fear. And it was directly affected by what had recently transpired. A mysterious figure taking my sister from me. An unfamiliar figure and me fighting. My blade finds its way into my opponent's chest. The hood falls back. My little sister's violet eyes look back, a look of betrayal in them. Why? She begs, her eyes slowly fogging over. You promised. We promised. The words I heard next were in my own voice. I don't know you. The kunai was what broke the genjutsu. God bless that kunai. The taste of blood and trying to breathe out of a busted lung was far more sufferable than seeing my sister die at my own hand. The first damn thing I'm learning is how to break a damn genjutsu. I'm not dealing with that shit again. For the next hour or so, I laid in the hospital bed, feigning sleep. Letting my thoughts wander to the conversation I had heard between the third Hokage and Yamanaka Inoichi. Sarutobi Hiruzen had nearly been ready to go home, his work finally finished. Much of the tedious paperwork had been handled. His missive to Jiraiya about the twins' reaction to his presence had just been sent on its way. Things were good. Everything pointed at him getting an early night's sleep. Something he hadn't had over the last several months since Orochimaru's betrayal. He could finally get some much-needed rest. But it was not to be. A shinobi knows above all else the total surprise death can arrive as. If given the opportunity, chaos will strike at the least opportune time. A discordant note, causing a complete disruption of the symphony. This note arrived in the form of a still uniformed Uchiha Itachi charging through the tower, right into his office, nearly kicking the door off its hinges to get in. Rising from his seat, ready for a potential confrontation, his chakra flared, he shouted towards what appeared to be one of his Anbu, "What is this? Why the hell was Itachi here? What was going on? Why did he have so much blood covering his front?" Itachi fell to one knee, head bowed. "Hokage-sama," he said, trying to slow his breathing from running. Uzumaki Naruto was attacked. The world seemed to go still. Hiruzen could feel his chest clench, his eyes widening at what he had just heard. What happened? He demanded, wanting to know what happened. Someone changed as a caretaker from the orphanage. Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Hiruzen. "Orphanage. Where is Rin?" he asked, his voice betraying his near panic. She was still there the last time I saw her. Guards, Hiruzen shouted. 3 of his Anbu guards in hiding appeared before him. Sir, they replied, awaiting orders. You too, he ordered, pointing at the 2 on the left. Go to the orphanage, find Uzumaki Rin and bring her to me. Where will you be, sir? One asked. Hiruzen gave Itachi a look, demanding to know where Naruto was. The hospital on the east side, the one more heavily guarded. Hiruzen turned back towards the 2 Anbu, bring her there. And if anyone tries to stop you, terminate. With extreme prejudice. This was not the kind old man that many saw when out in public. This was the man who was the star pupil of the Senju brothers. The professor. A man who had grown old in a profession where men die young. This was their age. With a nod, both Anbu left the office with haste, mission in mind. Both of you, with me, he instructed shortly, gesturing towards Itachi and the sole remaining guard. The 3 then left the office, the hospital is their destination. Rin had eventually cried herself to sleep. The exhaustion from the effort overwhelmed her. Her brother had left her. Alone. Abandoned. I don't know you. Those words had been burned into her mind, the look on his face as he said that as well. She was pulled from her troubled sleep when she heard a single knock on the door. She jumped from her bed, hoping beyond all hope it was her brother. She pulled the door open, only to be left disappointed. There were 2 masked Anbu, they looked like the ones that she sometimes spotted when she and her brother were with Gigi. Why are they here? What is going on? Why are you here? Tell me, she demanded, not even giving them time to answer her first question. You need to come with us, the one on the left said. Voice neutral. Not until you tell me why, she snarled angrily, the past few hours being terrible on her mind. The other Anbu responded in a clinical matter-of-fact tone. Almost like he was commenting about the weather. Your brother was attacked. Everything is still. She didn't hear him right. It was just a misunderstanding. What? She asked, eyes wide, all the anger in her voice vanishing. The Sandame told us to bring you to the hospital. He and your brother are there. The one on the left said this with a little more kindness than his partner. This can't be happening. Her brother was supposed to be invincible. Nothing could hurt him. None of the hate from the village or the orphanage bothered him. What happened? What happened? She asked, begging them to know who hurt her brother. You'll know more when we get there, he said, his tone showing that there would be no more discussion on the matter. Grabbing her shoes, she put them on and was ready to leave. Seeing this, the Anbu turned to leave, with their objective behind them. Hiruzen arrived at the hospital with Itachi and his Anbu guard in tow. Approaching the lady at the front, he asked about Naruto. You had a boy come in with a kunai wound to the chest, which room is he in? Noticing the man asking the question, the lady's eyes widened before she answered. Room 23, sir, she said, worried about what the Hokage being here meant. A brisk, thank you, was all she heard before the Hokage and his masked guards walked at a quick pace to the aforementioned room. Purpose in their stride. The sight Hiruzen was confronted with was a terrible one. Naruto was on a hospital bed, tied down, with close to half a dozen chakra suppressant tags on his forehead, limbs, and chest. Not to mention the copious amounts of blood that stained his clothes. It was Naruto's blood on Itachi, not Th. He realized. I need to know more about what precisely happened. The nurses on standby spotted the 3 men, the older of the 2 approaching Hiruzen. What happened? Why is he restrained? He asked, concerned on why that would be the case. The trauma surgeon ordered it. Something about, shinobi put under genjutsu thrashing around, or something along that line. I mostly cover non-shinobi patients, you'll need to speak with him if you want to know more. She replied, a look of disappointment that she couldn't give him more information. Thank you, he said, would you tell the surgeon I'm here? I wish to speak with him. The senior nurse nodded, before asking the younger one to come with her, the two exiting the room. Once the two had left the room, Hiruzen turned to Itachi, his face stern. Tell me everything that happened. His tone demanded no nonsense. Itachi told him everything that occurred, leaving nothing out. The henge, the genjutsu, the first and then second blast of chakra, and the after effects of it. The screaming, and finally the flinging the kunai, and carrying the boy to the hospital. Hiruzen then noticed how Itachi's eyes behind the mask were bloodshot and squinted. He had also noticed him quirk his jaw like he was trying to pop his ears more than once. How strong must the blast have been to do that? He wondered. Normally it was the Hyuga that would get their eyes irritated from extremely potent chakra. But it wasn't to this level. And it was a Sharingan that it happened to. Go home, Itachi, he whispered. He knew Itachi was not at his best and needed to rest and recover from whatever the hell happened. I'm still fine, sir, he responded, not wishing to be dismissed. You're focusing on my lips, not my eyes. And your eyes are redder than when they're activated. You can barely hear me, or see me. You need rest. Unless there is something else that you forgot to tell me, you should go home and recover. Don't be like Inu. At the mention of the other Anbu, Itachi deflated. He was right on all counts. Okay, sir, he said quietly, before stepping towards the door. One thing, he added. I can't be sure if I saw it correctly, but I thought I might have seen something shoot out from Uzumaki towards the. It looked gold-colored. But I can't be sure if it was just a trick of my vision. It was almost imperceptible. If Itachi wasn't looking for it, he would not have seen it. There was a very minuscule tightening of the Hokage's mouth at the mention of the golden thing he had seen. So it wasn't just me seeing things after the blast. He thought to himself, as he exited the hospital, in need of a rest for his eyes, ears, and mind. Seconds after Itachi left, the surgeon entered the room. The man looked to be in his early 40s, with his dark hair streaked with gray, one hand in his pocket. Spotting Hiruzen, he walked towards him to speak with him. You wished to speak with me, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded. Looking at the boy on the bed. Why is he restrained? The surgeon adopted a look of discomfort, as if thinking of a bad event. He was fighting us. He said simply, we tried to treat him but he was thrashing around too much. He ended up breaking one of the nurse's arms from a kick. Hiruzen looked straight at the man, as if thinking of something. How did you get the kunai out? We didn't. The man said simply, looking at his resting patient. He pulled it out himself. We restrained him because he started swinging it at us. Hiruzen looked at the boy, then back at the man. Tell me everything from the moment he got here. And the man did. Telling the Hokage how the boy promptly started thrashing around after he was handed over to them by the Anbu carrying him. Him screaming in an unknown language, repeating a certain word over and over again. Then trying to hold him down. The kick and the resounding crack of the nurse's forearm. The boy pulled the kunai out of his own chest, swinging it blindly. Only after they pried it out of his hand and restrained him did they notice something. The wound had already mostly closed, looking like days if healing had been done in the course of a minute. They thought it was the end of it until a small flash of chakra emanated from the boy. Gold in color, it caused a couple of shallow cuts on the nurses holding him down. The surgeon got it the worst, with a deep gash in the palm of his hand, explaining why he kept his bandaged hand concealed. They had to put a suppressant tag on him, but it burned away in seconds, so they put one on each limb, one over his heart, and one on his head. The tag on his head finally put him out. Hiruzen thanked the man for the information, telling him if he needed to know anything else, he'd ask for him. The surgeon nodded and left the room to get his hand healed the rest of the way. He had been in the middle of it being sealed up when the nurse had requested his help. Now it was only the Hokage and his remaining Anbu guard in the room. Turning to the masked shinobi, Hiruzen gave him a simple instruction. Do you know where Yamanaka Inoichi lives? He asked. At the nod of confirmation, he continued. Go to his house and tell him to meet me here. Tell him it's urgent. It pertains to his number 9 patient. The Anbu nodded, and promptly left the room, not wasting a minute. Hiruzen looked at the boy, his state of sleep softening his features, making him look even younger. I don't know how this could have happened. I will need to calm Rin down. Assure her he'll be fine. Kami, I hope Inoichi gets here so I can confirm it. About a minute later, one of the 2 Anbu he sent to collect Rin made himself known. Sir, he said simply, we have her. No problems en route. Nodding at what he had heard, Hiruzen went to exit the room. Where is she at? Waiting room. Stay here for now, Hiruzen ordered, I'll be back shortly. A simple nod was all Hiruzen saw before he exited the room, his path set to help a girl in the midst of an emotional crisis. Before even arriving at the waiting room, he could hear shouting. That's not good, he thought. Getting closer, he began to be able to discern what the shouting was about. I want to see him. Let me go. Knowing he had his work cut out for him, Hiruzen stoked himself up before entering. Kami gives me strength. Hopefully she's more reasonable than her mother or Mito. Famous last words, you poor bastard. Upon entering the room, he saw his Anbu guard holding the girl down in a chair, his hair frazzled and what appeared to be a bite mark on his right hand. When he saw the girl's hair bristling out in the form of several tails, his hopes rapidly diminished. Kami, it's worse. Upon seeing him, the girl's attitude seemed to do a 180. Gigi. She shouted, kicking the Anbu's leg to try and get free. Nodding towards the Anbu to let her go, to which he did, Hiruzen prepared to speak to Rin about her brother, a certain thought going through his head. They didn't clean the blood off him. Do I tell her she can't see him and lie? Or do I let her see him in the state he's in? The restraints look like what they do with prisoners. Or animals. With the girl free from his Anbu's grip, she ran towards him, grabbing him in a tight hug. Is he okay? She asked, her tone that of a frightened child, instead of the warrioress just seconds ago. He's not dead. No. He's not dead, he can't be. She continued, her voice more frantic with every word. Grabbing her tightly and forcing her to make eye contact, Hiruzen leaned in to look directly into her violet eyes. Rin, he said softly, he's not dead. He's going to be okay. They got him here. He'll be okay. He saw tears of relief spring from her eyes, her whole posture looking like she could collapse in his arms. I want to see him. Lie. Truth. Lie. Truth. Which one, damn it? Looking at her eyes, seeing the raw vulnerability in them, he made a choice that would plague his thoughts for weeks. Swallowing his guilt, he replied to the recently turned 6-year-old with his softest tone. He will be okay, but there are many people in the room and you would only make it harder for them to help him. When he saw her about to say something, he continued. Rin, don't tell me you wouldn't run straight to him and refuse to let go, even if they needed to treat him. Rin closed her mouth at this, knowing he was 100% correct. But it's my fault. She choked, a tear going down her face. I told him that I told you about his dream. Oh Kami, no wonder she is like this. She blames herself. Rin, look at me, he said sternly, getting on his knees to make direct eye contact. It is not your fault. It is the man who did this where the blame is. Do not blame yourself. He said he didn't know me. Hiruzen didn't know how to respond to that. What the hell was going through your mind, Naruto? To say that of all things. Thinking of something, he looked back at Rin. Do you trust me? At the sudden question, Rin looked up in slight surprise. Swallowing, she nodded a yes. Do you trust my judgment? Another nod. Then trust me when I say you are not to blame. Naruto will not blame you. Trust me that I know Naruto didn't mean it when he said that. And trust me when I say he will be okay. She was quiet for a moment before she relaxed and gave him an answer. Okay. She said softly, a watery smile on her face. Sitting up from his kneeling position, Hiruzen smiled softly, looking down at her. I'll let you know when I hear any news. Go and get something to eat if you need. The Anbu would love to take you. He finished, giving the Anbu a side glance. Not noticing the Anbu flinch, Rin walked away from Hiruzen, looking at a sign for directions to the cafeteria. When Hiruzen was almost to the doorway, he realized this might be a chance to sat his curiosity about something. Rin, he asked. Seeing her turn towards him, he voiced his question. The doctor said Naruto was saying a certain word repeatedly. We think it was a word that you two made up. At that, Rin's attention was piqued, wondering what word he had said. What is it? Hiruzen said the word, hoping he had pronounced it properly. He saw her adopt a look of slight concentration, as if trying to remember. When she did answer, he didn't know, till the day he died, how he managed to keep the horror and near terror from showing on his face. It means, fox. Yamanaka Inoichi was having, to put it mildly, a fantastic day. He had managed to call in a favor from Shikaku to have him babysit Ino for the night. Choza got in on the action and got Shikaku to take Choji for the night as well. Bonding experiences for the next Ino-Shika-Cho trio, they had told their wives. Despite the man's protests, they got him to take them on the promise of his debt being clean with them, mainly Inoichi. All they had to do was tell Shikaku one thing, or more specifically, a date. October 2nd. With that one sentence, all protests died from Shikaku. That day brought nothing but a combination of hilarity and trauma to Inoichi when he thought of it. Flashback. For all your smarts, you're a damned idiot. Inoichi grumbled to Shikaku, despite knowing he probably couldn't understand him in his drunken state. It had started with them going to their normal bar. The place the three close friends would go to relax and spend some time together on the weekends, away from their wives. Shikaku, as the Jonin commander, had been run rag the last several months since Orochimaru's betrayal. Needing to give the appearance of continued strength, mission rates had climbed, and much of the paperwork load was split between the Hokage and Shikaku. Shikaku's wife, Yoshino, was very understanding of his plight and wouldn't demand anything of him when he was home, understanding how very tired he was from all the work. She would show him how grateful she was for all his hard work. This included being very nice to the point of doting on him. As well as other things. The funny thing is, his work schedule had returned to normal a month ago. He conveniently left out how his schedule was no longer as intense as it was before. To celebrate his continued good fortune, he decided to imbibe in more amounts of alcohol than normal. Neither Choza or Inoichi realized how much he had drank until he fell out of his chair near closing time. Inoichi looked at Choza, shaking his head in exasperation. We're going to need to carry him home, aren't we? Choza snorted, and nodded his affirmative. Looks like it. He said gruffly, pulling the smaller man to his feet. Up you get, Shika. We need to get you home. Pulling the man to his feet, Choza let his grip slacken, only to have to catch the man again as he started to fall. How much did you drink? He asked, genuinely surprised that he was that out of it. The only response he received was a light snoring sound. He's passed out. Inoichi pointed out unnecessarily. No shit. Well, I guess I'm carrying his broomstick looking back. With that proclamation, Choza hoisted Shikaku's form upward and started carrying him to his house. We'll take him back to his house. I told my wife that I was meeting you and Shikaku sadly couldn't make it. Inoichi said to Choza. Choza just responded with a grunt, shifting Shikaku's weight to get a better grip. Sure thing. Damn, you'd think he drank half a barrel from how much he weighs. Inoichi snorted a snicker at that. Several minutes later, They got within visual sight of Shikaku's house when he began to stir. "Z's, where are we?" he slurred, his vision out of focus. "We're almost to your house. We'll get you to your room in no time," Inoichi assured him. At that sentence, Shikaku's eyes widened and he tried to get out of Choza's grip. "No. No. You can't," he said frantically, barely coherent. "Yoshino can't see me like this." "What do you mean she can't see you, Lee?" "Oh." Inoichi realized. All three of their wives knew how much Shikaku liked to drink. It was a form of relaxation. A way to let his mind slow down a bit. So he didn't think too much. It was such a drag. But there was something all of them, including Yoshino, knew about his habit. He never drank while on the job. Yoshino was sharp, not as sharp as her husband, but still sharp nonetheless. Shikaku had told her that he had been working on the weekends, which was true. But that was when his schedule was what he was saying it was. If he came home drunk, on a weekend, with his two best friends in tow, the jig would be up. Not only would she tear strips from her husband for being not only lazy, but a lying one as well. But she still wouldn't have her pound of flesh. She would tear into the two of them as well, for helping to hide it. She would tell their wives and leave the both of them in the doghouse as well. "For all your smarts, you're a damned idiot," Inoichi grumbled. Thinking of a plan, Inoichi came up with a plan that would rival Shikaku in brilliance. "We're still going to your house," he said. "Shut up and let me finish," he added irritably when he saw Shikaku try to interrupt him. "Your office is on the west side of your house, yes?" At Shikaku's nod, he continued, "I'll mind jumping into you, the alcohol won't affect me as much and Choza will carry me up there. I'll open up some files to make it look like you worked late and I'll have you in your office bed to look like you called it an early night." Choza stepped in with his own opinion. "I might not be able to get up the wall. I might have drunk too much. Intoxication. The bane of chakra control. Unless you had a tolerance of legendary proportion, you weren't going to be able to belt out the most effective jutsu, even something as simple as sticking to a wall. You have more tolerance than us," Inoichi said, gesturing towards himself and Shikaku. Several minutes later, they arrived at the side of Shikaku's house. Choza gently let Shikaku down, his form looking like a stiff wind could blow him over. "You ready?" Inoichi asked. Shikaku nodded. Using the jutsu his clan was known for, Inoichi made the hand signs very slowly. "Kami, I'm drunk." Jumping into Shikaku's mind, Inoichi opened his eyes to see his unconscious form just a short distance away. That was much easier, he thought. It was normally almost impossible for him to jump into Shikaku's mind. The man was in possession of one of the strongest minds in the elemental nations. But that was, of course, operating under the assumption that he wasn't half a step away from blackout drunk. "Inoichi?" he heard Choza ask from behind. Turning around, Inoichi nearly staggered from the movement. "If it's bothering me this much, how stinking drunk is he?" "Yeah, I'm good," he answered, after seeing the look of concern on Choza's face. "I don't like this, you shouldn't be doing mind jumps drunk." Inoichi waved his concerns off. His plan was brilliant. Brilliant enough it would leave Shikaku green with envy. "Not a big deal. Just get me up there, I'll pull some papers out onto the desk and I'll drop him in his bed, and we'll be done." Choza simply responded by turning to walk to the brick side of the house, muttering something along the line of, "Idiots, the both of you." Inoichi let it slide. His plan was brilliant. It would work. Following Choza, he got another look from his friend. "Shika's chakra doesn't work well with mine." It had been something he and Shikaku had been theorizing over for years. The Yamanaka clan techniques were not as effective on the Nara. Shikaku theorized that since the shadow technique of the Nara was yin-heavy, just like the Yamanaka's mind technique, they acted like same-side magnets and repelled one another. But that was just a theory. Choza nodded his understanding. Grabbing a hold of Inoichi in Shikaku's body and putting his foot on the wall, he said one last thing. Don't get pissed if I drop you. You won't. Taking a step up the wall, Choza carried Inoichi up the wall. 1 step. 2. 3. 4. After about the halfway mark, Choza started to wobble. You okay, Choza? Inoichi asked, alarmed. Yeah, he grunted. Just getting a little slick. Taking another step, a chunk of brick broke off the wall, causing Choza to lose his balance. Being forced to either fall, with Inoichi in tow, or drop him, Choza made the right choice. He dropped his friend. The look of betrayal on his face wouldn't have been comical if it were any other situation. You bastard. Inoichi thought. Inoichi looked back as he fell, trying to see where his fall would take him. It all seemed to go so painstakingly slow. He saw where he was going to fall, and it was the worst spot imaginable. He was going to fall on himself. Kami, not the face. His prayers went unheeded. He saw, in his mind's eye, where he was going to hit. 20 feet. 15. 10. When he struck the ground, Shikaku's bony elbow found its landing in a quite sensitive area of the male anatomy. The agony was unimaginable. The force of the impact broke his mind. He was back in his own body, experiencing pain no man should ever feel. Gasping for air, he rolled to his side, eyes watering and heaving from pain. Choza had a look of horror on his face, rapidly turning green at the thought of the pain his friend was in. Shikaku chose that time to wake up from the mind jump, confused as to why he wasn't in his bed. The hell happened? He slurred, looking down. He was pulled from his lethargic thoughts by the sound of gasping to his left. Seeing his friend clutching his genitals and on the ground, Shikaku asked a question any man in his situation would. The hell happened to you? Pulling himself up, after the worst of the pain had subsided, Inoichi looked at Shikaku with contempt. You. Oh. Me. He gritted out. Inoichi sat there a moment, before dragging himself to his feet, pulling Shikaku up with him. He pulled Shikaku several feet further away from the wall before turning to him. Inoichi went through the hand signs again, only to be interrupted by Shikaku swaying. Hold still, Shika, he growled, in no mood for anything else. I think I'm gonna be sick. I'm gonna vom blodge. Shikaku vomited all the alcohol he had consumed out of his stomach. And all over Inoichi. Inoichi stood there, shaking. He looked at his friend with an unmatched hatred. Putting his hands up, Shikaku tried to placate his friends with a rightfully irate mood. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He was punched in the face by his blonde friend, dropping to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Inoichi went through the hand signs again, jumping into his possibly former friend again. Stop laughing, jackass, he bit out irritably at another potential former friend. Choza had tears in his eyes from laughing so hard. Composing himself, he walked up to Inoichi, his voice still full of mirth. Idiots. The both of you. I said I might drop you. Inoichi couldn't even offer a counter. He was correct when he said that. Sighing with a sense of defeat, he contemplated on what he could even do. What are we even going to do? He asked, with none of his former optimism. You can't climb, I can't, and the drunk can't either. Not even addressing him by his name. Choza stood there a moment, before a moment of realization seemed to dawn on him. We're all idiots, he stated firmly, before expanding his arm, using his clan's technique. I thought you couldn't do that. Inoichi stated, thinking Choza would have been too drunk to do it. I can do one arm, he stated, before grabbing a hold of Inoichi. Arms and legs closed. If you spike me into the wall, I'll kill you. Choza just snorted at his friend's threat. As if. Before flinging him at the window. Somehow, it worked. Inoichi, in Shikaku's body, flew through the window and landed on the floor of the office. I can't believe that worked. Dusting himself off, Inoichi stepped over to Shikaku's drawer, pulled out a few papers, arrayed them in a fashion as if they were recently finished, and was prepared to strip off Shikaku's clothes when he heard the door to the office open. Oh, what fresh hell is this? Inoichi saw Yoshino walk in, a purple nightgown draped across her frame, looking like she was stalking towards him. She knows. She knows. Don't panic. Just play it cool. Mimicking Shikaku's posture, he looked at Yoshino with Shikaku's normal look when he talked to his wife. Yes. He asked. I didn't realize you were back, she said simply. A look of confusion on her face. Why didn't you wake me? Inoichi had to play this safe. If he screwed up on anything, he was doomed. I needed to finish some papers I left here, he said, with Shikaku's familiar drawl. I didn't want to wake you. You've done so much for me these past few months and I don't want you to think I'm taking it for granted. At that response, Yoshino's features softened. Oh sweetie, you don't have to do that. You work so hard and I'm proud of you for sticking to it anyway. Each word was punctuated by her taking another step towards him. Oh no, he thought. Please no. As she was within a foot of him, her hand reaching to cup his face, he made a decision. Even if it caused him to break character. Screw it. I won't do it. Stopping her hand, he looked at her softly. I'm sorry, but I can't. I have to finish these papers and take them to the Hokage tomorrow. It will take me a few more hours. Pouting at the denial, Yoshino patted his cheek. Okay. But I expect you to take your reward tomorrow. Inoichi simply nodded. Very uncomfortable right now. As she was about to leave the room and he turned to reach for the papers, he heard her voice call for him. Sweetie, he turned, and saw something he would never imagine he would see. She stood at the doorway, nightgown on the floor, not a stitch of clothing on her. She smiled smugly at the look of shock on his face, mistaking it for desire. Here's just a taste of your present, she said, before stepping out of the room. Getting his heart rate calmed down, he shifted the papers around some more, before heading to the bed. I hate you so much, you drunken bastard. Feeling extra vindictive, he stripped Shikaku's clothes off and chucked the shirt out the window. Shutting off the light and climbing under the covers, he had a few parting words for his friend. Nighty night, jackass. Opening his eyes, his own eyes, he sat up, feeling the vomit drip from his hair. What took so long? Choza asked, wondering why it took more than a few minutes. Inoichi looked at him with an empty look. I don't want to talk about it. Seeing that his friend was in no mood to talk, Choza let it be. Why the shirt? He asked, having seen the shirt fly out the window. Inoichi stepped towards the article of clothing, grabbing it, and proceeded to wipe the vomit off his face with it. Oh, was Choza's only response. The two then parted ways and headed to their respective homes, silently vowing not to bring it up with anyone but themselves. End flashback. Inoichi was shaken from his thoughts by the sight of his wife. She was in a silk lingerie outfit, approaching him like a predator stalking its prey. They weren't able to do this when Ino was home. They weren't wanting to scar her for life. Thanks, jackass. Thinking of his close friend. You got to reap the benefits of me and Choza lying for you. Now it's our turn. She walked towards him, settling herself on his lap. He leaned in for a kiss, only to be stopped by his wife, a coy smile on her face. She said, finger on his lips. I want to know, how did you convince Shikaku to take Ino and Choji for the night? Inoichi responded with a wry grin, my silver tongue. He asked rhetorically, grin not leaving his face. Oh, I think I can find out. And it involves your silver tongue. Before they could go any further, a knock was heard at the door. Were you expecting someone? She asked confusedly. This was supposed to be a night off for the both of them. No. It's probably nothing, let's just continue, he said, not wanting to give up this night of all nights. Another knock. This time, much louder. Just get it, his wife said finally. See who it is and then we can get back to it. She rises off his lap to go into the other room, obviously not dressed for guests. Inoichi walked to the door, murder in his eyes. Shika, I swear if it's you and you've got yourself drunk again, I'm gonna drop you in the Inuzuka kennels with raw beef tied around you. He was stopped in the middle of his tirade by seeing the individual at the door. It was an Anbu, one of the Hokage's guards, to be exact. What are you doing here? He asked, realizing that he answered the door without a shirt on. Patient number 9 was attacked. You are needed. Digesting what the Anbu had just said, Inoichi's brows nearly disappeared into his hairline. Naruto attacked. Why would I be needed? Damn it, the seal. Which hospital? He asked urgently, needing to know which one. The east one, was the reply. Wait here, he said, heading back into his house to inform his wife of the change in plans, and to grab a shirt. At the confused look from his wife, he walked up to her to inform her of what had transpired. The Uzumaki boy was attacked, they need my help. The look on his wife's face said it all. Your help? That means something is very wrong. Could it be? I don't know. He replied, his hand cupping her cheek. I need to get there to see what is going on. I'll be back soon. I love you. She gave him a quick kiss before handing him his shirt. I love you too, was the only thing she said before walking to their bedroom. Sighing at the mess of an otherwise romantic night, he put on his shirt and walked back towards his front door, opening it. I'm ready, he said. The Anbu nodded, before turning to leave, beckoning Inoichi to follow. With that, Inoichi stepped forward, closed the door, and followed the Anbu to Konoha's hospital in the hopes of helping a young boy. Arriving at the hospital, the two men walked to room 23, the masked one guiding the blonde. Entering the room, Inoichi saw that the only other person in there aside from Naruto, who was restrained to the bed, was Sandame. Stepping forward, he addressed the elder shinobi. Hokage-sama. He asked questioningly, wanting to know the precise reason he was here. Inoichi, he said softly, I fear something far worse has happened than I previously thought. What do you mean, sir? He was confused now. How serious was it if the Hokage was worried? The elder of the two stood there silently for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. Leave us, he said, looking at the sole Anbu in the room. The masked man nodded, before exiting the room. This was bad. Very bad. What would cause him to dismiss one of his personal guards? What can you tell me about Naruto and Rin's personal language? That was a bit out of the blue. Shaking off the slight bit of surprise, Inoichi gave an answer. Not a lot, I confess. Twins tend to sometimes make their own language up. It's not the same as any language I've heard before. Different sounds. Different stressing of syllables. And he also says them more slowly. Anything else? Inoichi thought for a moment, before answering. He showed me a few words. He wrote them out with a different alphabet. Not one I recognize. He showed me a few words. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. All of this had been written in his weekly reports to the Hokage. Why would he be asking this in person? Do you remember any of the words, at the top of your head? Inoichi tried to think of any of the words, but came up short. No, I can't. Would you recognize one if I said it out loud? Now Inoichi was getting concerned. Why was the Hokage doing this? It wasn't like him to play games, especially for this event. Why are you asking me this, sir? What's wrong with Naruto? The Hokage turned to face him, having had his back to him the whole time. What he saw was something that took his breath away. The Hokage was pale. Paler than he had ever seen. His hand was slightly shaking from stress. The surgeon said that Naruto pulled the kunai that had stabbed him out of his own chest. He started. Inoichi flinched at the image. He swung it at them and they were forced to restrain him with restraints and suppressant tags. But that is not what worries me. What worries me is what the surgeon had said afterwards. He said Naruto was shouting words that he could not understand. One word, in particular, was repeated. He told me how it sounded. I asked Rin if she knew what it meant, when she arrived here. Now, can you guess what her answer was? Inoichi knew it was bad if the Hokage was evading like this. Mustering his will, he looked the man in the eye, requesting the answer. The Hokage looked straight at him, and answered. She said the word meant, fox. Underscore. The look Inoichi had on his face at the answer mirrored the Hokage's. That's, he started, not knowing what to say. That's not good. The only way that Seal would let something like that leak to him, tight as you said it was, would mean. It's breaking. The Hokage finished, his eyes downcast. Inoichi didn't know what to say. They had a plan. Jiraiya tightened the seal, keeping the excess yin chakra from flooding the boy's brain. Inoichi was the one that spotted gaps in the boy's personality. He thought up the reason for it. He, with Hiyashi's help, found that there was a large portion of chakra, mostly yin, that was trapped in the seal. And it wasn't the Kyūbi's. His best theory was that when the Kyūbi's yin half was sealed into the boy, the seal pulled in the extra yin chakra he was born with. It seemed to have stunted his mind for the first couple years. His appointments with the boy were a mixture of talking and scanning the boy's mind. With each passing year, the seal leaked out a bit of the Kyūbi's chakra, as was intended, the Hokage had told him. When the small amount of the Kyūbi's chakra leaked into his system, it carried a small portion of his own personal yin chakra that was accidentally sealed at his birth. The more time that passed, the more chakra that reconnected with its source. He noticed, over the years, the boy's mind fog and confusion steadily improved. His thoughts were more clear, his speech more precise, and he seemed to carry a level of maturity that belied most children his age. If Inoichi had to place a bet on it, he would have bet that had the seal not caught the overreach of his yin chakra and pulled a large chunk from the original, he would likely have shown an intellectual brilliance on the same level of Namikaze, Hitaki, or the Uchiha heir. A once-in-a-generation prodigy. He had planned on having the Hokage's help by popping one of the tighteners on the seal and shepherding the largest yin portion still behind the seal into the boy's chakra system for reintegration, curing him of all of his maladies. But that only works if the seal isn't collapsing. There is no possibility, according to Jiraiya, that the seal would weaken enough to give him images of the fox, unless the seal was structurally destabilized. It shouldn't do so until Jiraiya removed the tightenings himself. That's why he's shaking. Naruto is asleep. He needs me to mind walk to see if Kyūbi is in his mind. The question is, what will he do if I find it? Stealing himself, he asked the Hokage that very question. You want me to mind walking? At the nod, he continued. And if I see Kyūbi in his mind? What then? Jiraiya-sama won't be here in time to stop it. He continued, knowing, despite not being well versed in seals, what happens when a jinchūriki seal breaks down. Hiruzen simply gave him an empty look, before pulling a kunai from his hip. I will do what I must. Any strength the man had was absent from his tone. Inoichi approached the boy's sleeping form. He didn't know if it was a trick of his hearing or not, but he thought he heard a whisper that sounded like, the village, or my heart. He couldn't be quite sure. He looked down at the boy who was the same age as his own daughter, face soft in sleep. Innocent. Kami, please let there be nothing. Going through the hand signs, he did his mind jump. Underscore. Entering Naruto's mind, Inoichi was confused. There was darkness. What memory is this? Fasting it forward, he saw something that he wasn't exactly expecting. He saw 3 lights. They felt very much like fire. The one was safe. One was bright. The third was intense. What are they? It only took him a minute to put the pieces together. Are these chakra signatures? Whose are they? Fasting forward the memory further, he eventually got to something aside from seeing the bright signature grow brighter. He saw the one that felt safe, and brightness began flickering. Wondering what the hell this memory was, he fast-forwarded further. Things went black for a moment, the flames went out. Not long after, he heard what sounded like a baby crying. He saw a flicker, then something greater. Multiple signatures. One was right next to him. He knew he was looking at things from Naruto's perspective. He finally realized what this memory was. The day of his birth. How the hell does he remember this? This isn't supposed to be possible. Even the Nara, with their greater than normal minds, don't remember this far back. Could it be a side effect of something? I don't know. He was taken out of his thoughts by a slight sign of movement in the boy's vision. This is chakra sensing at a level one normally don't see in most children who are sensors, let alone a newborn who sensed his mother, sister, and Kyūbi before he was even born. The slight movement was there in an instant. The light holding him winking out and a burst of blood falling on his face. Even insulating his mind from his patients, or prisoners, didn't completely stop all of the feedback. He felt Naruto's terror at a light vanishing. He probably doesn't even know what that would mean. Something not human grabbed him. Everything got a little fuzzy, until the whole world seemed to explode in light. I can't breathe. Inoichi thought. Wait. Is this Naruto's dream? Did he subconsciously have this in the back of his mind? This is what the large chunk of chakra that simply wouldn't budge was holding back. If I'd tried to shepherd it in without realizing that there is this intense memory with it, I might have got my mind damaged. Badly. The mass of chakra disappeared from the boy's range. Thank Kami for small blessings. The next part was Naruto feeling a cold sensation on his stomach, something painted on his stomach, with his sister right next to him. The final part was near the end. He could feel the memory was almost over. For the first time, he saw through Naruto's actual eyes. Of course, the first thing the boy would see in this world was the Kyūbi out for his blood. Nine tails swishing furiously, a deafening roar. He saw Namikaze Minato summoning something. He saw Kushina holding the beast down with our chains, attempting to keep it still. He saw it. The chains are weakening. A tail shooting forward. A shout of warning. He saw the two jump forward. A sound of flesh being pierced. Their faces. The memory looked slightly damaged. He couldn't see what they were saying. What came next was one of the worst experiences he'd ever felt in a mind jump. The lights winking out in front of him. The crying as his sister screamed in pain. The screaming of his own, when the other half was sealed in him. It felt like he was on fire, and this was an insulated sensation. It was much worse than what he was feeling. His lonely cries for help. No one is coming. But then, when he thought he was going to be saved from his pain, these strange lights stole his sister from him. His light vanished. Darkness. He was forcefully driven into another memory, this one far more recent. He saw Naruto and his sister talking. A look of concern on the boy's face. You're scaring me, he said, wanting his sister to tell him something that she was keeping from him. She told him of her telling the Hokage about his dream. The feeling of betrayal. Abandonment. Darkness. Hatred. The shouting was awful. I shouldn't be seeing this. It's too private. He saw Naruto blast through the door and out of the orphanage, to an unknown destination. He saw that they were now at a park, one that Inoichi recognized. The boy was there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes until he saw one of the caretakers at the orphanage. Inoichi recognized this one. She never did seem friendly towards the boy whenever he saw two of them together. He noticed the out-of-character tone that she addressed him with. Henge. Inoichi thought. The assailant in disguise lied to Naruto about his sister being at the hospital. His caution was tossed to the wind and he followed her, in the direction of the hospital. Some minutes later, they made it to an alley. The henge was dropped, fear of his sister being hurt by this stranger spiked. The snarled demand of where she was. The non-answer. Pulling a blunt kunai and charging. Getting knocked to the ground. Here it is. he thought. This will likely determine whether its seal collapses. The genjutsu cast. The sight Inoichi saw through Naruto's eyes. Oh Kami, no wonder you were screaming. He saw what Naruto saw. His sister looked at him in betrayal as she died in his arms. I don't know you. The kunai is what broke the genjutsu. He fell to the ground, gasping for air. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Seemed to be the only coherent thoughts that he could muster up. He didn't remember the Kyūbi attack. He only remembered the effects its killing intent had on him. The inability to breathe was only part of it. It reminded him of losing his light. The last decipherable portion was of Naruto pulling the kunai out of his chest. The sensation of the wound knitting together like a medi nin was using their mystical palms technique, but there was no one doing that. The last part was him screaming that word again. The memory of the Kyūbi attack dancing through his head. But Naruto didn't truly believe that the word meant fox. He didn't tell his sister that he thought it meant something worse, far worse. Demon. Inoichi pulled away from the mind jump, falling to his knees, his stomach desperately trying to rebel against him. Inoichi. The Hokage asked, alarmed, walking towards the man. Are you alright? Inoichi just simply looked at him and replied with a monotone voice. He remembers the attack. The Hokage looked slightly confused at the answer. That's not that surprising. That's what put him here. No. Not this attack. He gestured to the boy. The Kyūbi attack. He heard a deep intake of breath. Impossible. The Hokage gasped, not wanting to leave such a terrible thing that could be remembered at that early of an age. I didn't want to believe it either, but it was the attack. After forcing himself up, he continued. I saw it. Hiruzen's response was 3 words. Tell me everything. And so he did. The attack. The argument that caused this whole debacle. The recent attack. The genjutsu. The reason he was screaming that word. What the word really meant. Even with the clarification on how deep the issues were, Hiruzen couldn't help but see the good in it. The seal isn't damaged. Only the memory was lost. Yes. Inoichi replied. This was actually a better way to get his remaining yin chakra free from the seal. The tightenings felt like they were still there. If we'd removed one and then I tried to pull some of his chakra back, like we planned to, it might have caused my mind or his to break. I wasn't expecting a memory to be the center of the remaining portion of chakra. It felt like a limb's worth. That was the frightening part. If the yin chakra had not been accidentally sealed away, the excess amount may have potentially caused development issues that would have been aggravated further with maturity. But that was more of a worst-case scenario. It seemed almost as if something caused a series of increasingly unlikely events that actually benefited them in the long run. Neither man was going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Will there be psychological or personality differences? Was Hiruzen's only question. Inoichi thought for a minute or two, before giving his best answer. Very unlikely. One memory, no matter how traumatic, won't change a personality to something else. On the psychological part, we know what that event did to seasoned war veterans. I'm worried what it will do to a 6-year-old boy who hasn't seen war. Hasn't seen death like we have. Hiruzen got quiet at that, deep in thought. You, me, and Rin are the only ones who he can trust with this, he said firmly. We will need to be there for him. Inoichi nodded before adding something else. I think his thinking will be much clearer than it was before. He always had more maturity than the average child his age. Hiruzen had noticed that. Some of the boy's behavior almost reminded him how Jiraiya had described Minato when he was that age. I got my own little genius, sensei, he said gleefully. And I think he's even better than Orochi was. Before doing that ridiculous little dance of his, Hiruzen knew that trauma could change a person. It had changed such a bright child that was Orochimaru into someone obsessed with stopping death. Hiruzen knew, even when his student tried to hide it, That he was trying to stop death so no one would feel like he had seen Tsunade feel. Or himself. He never thought he would stoop to such levels to defy death. Man's last night. The love that he had for his mother and father. The love that he had for his teammates. That beautiful, bright love. Was the same love that fortified him in evil. I can't let that happen to Naruto. The death of his parents and the sight of his friend's pain is what initially drove Orochimaru. Was there something else when he decided to sever ties with the village? His home. His friends. Perhaps. But he likely wouldn't find out. Hiruzen needed to be there to help Naruto. He couldn't let another Orochimaru happen. Not with the power of a Biju. Not with a power he believed the boy inherited from his mother's line. I will be there for you, even if it kills me. I've lived a long life. Yours has just begun. His thoughts turned to Inoichi. He looked at the man, seeing his slight swaying. It took a great deal out of you, yes? He asked, noticing the man's fatigue. The memory was intense, he admitted. I can feel my pulse in my head. Get some sleep. You need to be at your best. Nodding, Inoichi left to go home, wishing for an end to the night. Hiruzen left a minute after, but before he left, he turned to have a look at the boy that was his grandson in all but blood. I'm sorry, Minato, Kushina. He whispered to himself, a tear rolling down his cheek, before exiting the room. Unbeknownst to either man, as the Hokage's back was turned again to leave, a pair of sharp blue eyes opened, a look of deep thought in them. So friends, this was episode 1 of this thrilling alternate history adventure. If you enjoyed it and want episode 2 soon, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also comment down your thoughts. How do you think the shinobi world would change if Naruto and Rin both carried the power of the 9 tails? I'll see you in the next episode.